OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Okay, you're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Gilroy and Owen Sheehan with you all the way through until 10 a.m. this morning. You can get in touch. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can use the hashtag OTBAM. We're live across all of our social channels on YouTube, on Facebook and on Twitter. And the best place to listen to us these days is on OTB Sports Radio. Packed show for you. We've got the very latest on Irish sport in Level 3. Daniel Harris is going to talk to us about what a transfer window that was for Manchester United and what's coming next. Former NBA star Etan Thomas represented Oklahoma City Thunder, the Wizards and the Atlanta Hawks. He's talking about why he thinks it's fair to compare LeBron to Muhammad Ali. We'll talk GAA with John Fogarty, and Kathleen McNamee will look back at deadline day and ahead to Ireland's trip to Slovakia, which is coming down the tracks at a rate of knots. In the meantime, first, here's some of the highlights from last night's show, featuring Pat Nevin on Manchester United and Anthony Staines and Alan Milton on the GAA's decision to call off club games.
It can't be just a fluke. It's gone on for 4 games. I think I'm right in saying there hasn't been a 0-0 draw yet in the Premier League, right? Which is kind of weird after 4 rounds of football. But also the massive scorelines you're getting. The weird ones we got yesterday, obviously, Manchester United, Liverpool. But there's odd other halves now and again that you think, what? Chelsea were 3-0 down against West Brom. You're thinking, come on, seriously. So, number of reasons. It's never one reason, right? Number one, most of the players haven't had a full pre-season, right? So a lot of them actually aren't fit enough to play the number of games they've been asked to play just now. And they are playing slightly too many games, more than they would normally do. So they're almost, some of them are just kind of still in pre-season mode. It's not that they're not trying hard, it's just their bodies aren't quite up yet. So that's definitely one thing. Remember, it was a very limited break they had as well, after what was an unusual end to the season. So there's all that stuff as well. But I think it's wider than that. I think, as I've championed, and many of us have, this focus on attack-minded systems. I take it back to Barcelona, but look at Man City, look at Liverpool. The teams that are winning things are attack-minded sides. So everyone thought, all right, that's how you do it then, is it? And then they've kind of left the defence as like a really secondary thing. And I watch a lot of the teams. I was at Leeds United a couple of weeks ago. Honestly, they were doing things. I was like slack-jawed. I couldn't believe what they were doing. They were attacking at 4-1 up and leaving like 3 people back, when the entire team's up. You're thinking, what are you doing that for? You could lose it. And they nearly did. It was against Fulham and it went back to 4-3. So a lot of them are really attack-minded teams. Add on to that the fact that everybody's decided they're going to play out from the goalie now. Like, even if you ain't good enough, lots of them aren't good enough. And I'm not just talking about the keepers. Lots of them are nowhere near good enough to be playmaker playing for the back. So they're losing a lot of goals and a lot of chances from there. So that's really, really weird. Stick on top of that, how easy it is to get a penalty at the start of this season. The daftness of the penalties, etc. So you've got a whole big mix of things all coming in together. And I think if you look for one reason, I think you will be backing up the wrong tree. I think there are a lot of reasons they've all come back in together. And I think maybe the oddness of the emptiness of the grounds, that's probably the final thing, right, where, some of the tension's taken out of some of the games. Little things like, you don't hear a guy shouting man on, you hear one of the guys shouting man on, but you used to hear 30,000 people shouting man on or whatever. So you don't get a kind of, there's a little difference there as well. So there's a whole bunch of things getting together, but it's bizarre. It is absolutely and utterly bizarre. The amount of teams that are losing the amount of goals they are. I mean, Leicester, they beat Man City 5-2. I mean, that is bizarre enough, and it is in itself. And then they go and lose 3-0 to West Ham. It's all over the place. I'd hate to be a betting man just now. I really would.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, I mean, my jaw hit the floor more, I think, with events at Villa Park, and this is probably the only time that Liverpool, defending champions, losing 7-2 won't be the first port of call here. And my rationale is there could be wider and more significant ramifications at Old Trafford. So, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, how much trouble is he in now?
Well, first thing is, the best thing that happened to him was what happened at Aston Villa. It's taking a little bit of the pressure off, just a little bit of the pressure off as well. Yeah, I mean, if it's one of those ones, if it's 5, it's 4 or 5, it's really bad, then it gets to 6, and you think, no, this is awful. he has always got to come back. It was 10 men, and that made a complete mess of what was going anyway. They weren't playing well. Spurs were the better team, but when that happened, they were down to 10 men. They just didn't reorganise and restructure well enough, and no one seemed to have a particularly good game. And they hit Spurs on a good day. Now, at the moment, Spurs play well. They don't have to look really good. They can score a lot of goals because, Son looked fantastic just now. Harry Kane seems to be in fantastic form as well. Not just scoring, but creating goals as well. But, I think he's in trouble, yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he'll get sacked over, between now and the next game. It's just too many opportunities to bring players in have been missed. And we're talking in the transfer window just now. And it looks as if they might buy the left-back, is it Telles?
Alex Telles, yeah.
Yeah, they don't need a left-back, they need a centre-back. Everybody knows that. He's never quite got that centre-back pairing right. So there's a lot going on. But it's worse than that. There was no real fight. And again, I'm back on it, and it does sound as if I'm biased. But there was one of the goals, and I think it was the 5th or the 6th. Just watch Paul Pogba. It's actually embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. Doesn't try a leg. 1-2 around him, goes into the area, doesn't even try to get back. And you're thinking, have a level of pride at that point. Fight and battle for your teammates, your manager, your club, yourself, anything. And I'm singling him out just now because it was obvious the other ones that weren't doing well, but there was a lot of people trying, making an effort. With him, it was just a jog on quite a few occasions. And you can't do that when you get 10 men. Everybody has to work their socks off. So, the problems with equality, fair enough, but you need everybody working. And when you see that happening in that sort of situation, I thought that was awful. I thought it was dreadful to watch. It was the second worst thing I've seen in the game. Obviously, after the sending off, which I thought was, honestly, head and hands. I know you want to talk about Man United, but seriously, going down and pretending you're injured like that, the game is absolutely gone if you send off Martial and he stays on. And for me, it's still, and I do go on about it quite a bit, it is the worst thing you can do in football, is feign head injury. Because that's the biggest thing you're trying to get rid of in the game, the fears and worries of what we've got when someone gets a real injury. And he throws himself down, and I don't need to tell you, everybody watched it, was completely disgusted by it.
First, though, very happy to say we have Alan Milton with us, GAA Press Department, and Professor Anthony Staines from DCU. Gents, thanks for the time this evening. Anthony, if I could start with you. Firstly, was drastic action required at this point, and then your reaction to the government going for level 3 against NPHET advice of level 5?
I think drastic action is required. We're seeing rising numbers of cases, rising numbers of hospital admissions, rising numbers in ICU. One thing to remember is the number of cases we have today reflects the number of infections maybe 5 days, 10 days ago. So we don't know what's going on now, but whatever it is, it's probably worse. So the government had to respond to that. NPHET made a recommendation, which is for national restrictions, quite significant and severe restrictions. And I think if we want to bring the number of cases down, and that is that the policy is to what they call strongly suppress the virus, to reduce the number of cases to a level our health service can cope with. If we want to do that, we need quite significant restrictions, and we need to apply them across the country. We then, I think, need to move very quickly to running the restrictions county by county based on local knowledge, local public health advice, and what's happening locally. So there are counties where there's very few cases, where the number of cases could be brought down very quickly. And there's counties, and unfortunately, Dublin, where I live, is one of them, where there's a very large number of cases, and it will be a much slower process. So I think start national, but work fairly quickly towards the regionals would be my thought on it.
And your thoughts on the government saying, we hear what you're saying, NPHET, but we'll go with level 3?
I think it's a mistake. I think we will find ourselves in 2 weeks' time. I hope I'm wrong, by the way. I hope this does work. But I think and fear that we will find ourselves in 2 weeks' time saying, well, we should have gone to level 4 or level 5. Let's do it now. And it's the nature of this disease that it spreads quickly. So the number of cases goes up very quickly. We had, I think, 500 and something cases today. We could easily have 800 or 900 cases a day in 2 weeks' time. And that's going to put a terrible pressure on our health services. So there is a real and legitimate fear that our health services will be seriously stressed by everything that's going on. And we need to deal with that. And I think the earlier we take action and the more decisive the action, the lower the costs. This virus is causing huge economic damage. If we can bring it down to lower levels, there'll be less economic damage. And when we do get to bringing it down to lower levels, then we can have the conversation. Do we want to follow New Zealand? Do we want to follow Australia and try and bring it down to zero, which is what my colleagues and I would advocate? Or do we want to keep it at a low level? But in either case, we have to bring it down to a low level before we get anywhere else.
Yeah. How does the preparedness of the health system now compare to last March and April?
We're more ready for it clinically. So we are more geared up as clinicians. My clinical colleagues understand this better. We are not really more geared up in terms of capacity. Before COVID was ever heard of, most people in the services thought this winter was going to be very bad indeed. COVID is going to make this winter genuinely dire. There is every prospect that we will run out of basic health service capacity over the winter unless we bring the number of cases down. Our health service normally operates at about 99% bed capacity in hospitals. Our community care services, our general practice services are very under-resourced. We have a service that puts money in the wrong places. So to cope with COVID, we're going to need to do a lot of stuff very quickly, but we also need to set ourselves on a path for longer-term reform. Paul Reid made the suggestion, I think it was a lot of merit in it. What we should try and do is to do sláinte care in about 30 months rather than 10 years. And I think we could. But we've got to do something right now to get through the winter.
One last one, Anthony, before I bring in Alan Milton from the GAA, who's standing by patiently. This was pitched earlier on, I noticed, NEFIT almost saying it's level 5 to keep the schools open. You know, this was being pitched as it's the economy or the schools. To what extent are the schools currently contributing to the growth in cases, or do we know?
We don't absolutely know. There's very recent work from India which says that this disease spreads more in schools than have been realised. So they're contributing part of it, but unlike flu, where schools are absolutely key to the spread of influenza, that doesn't seem to be true for COVID. I'm more worried about the colleges, the third level colleges, and older school children in secondary school than I am about younger school children in primary schools.
Okay. Jim has texted in to say, Jesus, lads, enough. This is a sports show. Give me a break from the bleeding news already. I hear you, Jim. I apologise. Alan Milton from the GAA is with us. Evening, Alan.
Good evening.
So, level 3 means no sporting events bar professional or elite matches. That includes adult club and inter-county matches being allowed to go ahead. Obviously, no spectators at those events. So, in accordance with level 3, you would be allowed to continue with the club fixtures. The GAA and the Ladies Association this afternoon went a step further. So all club matches stopped until further notice. Give us the rationale.
We've been watching this for some time, Joe, and there have been a number of incidents brought to our attention, both by members and from non-members, and we doubled down on our efforts last week. The GAA President John Horn had a conversation with Dr. Ronan Glynn, who asked for help in trying to get our membership to be more compliant when they were attending games and crucially after games. We contacted all our counties last week. We underlined the importance of adhering to this particular message, and some of the incidents that we saw over the weekend were, in our book, just unacceptable. So the decision we reached early this morning, and we hastily scheduled a management committee meeting to rubber stamp this or to discuss it, was that regardless of what the government were going to do, and there'd been a lot of speculation from 8 o'clock onwards last night, and there's still speculation because we don't have anything concrete, that we didn't feel comfortable standing over some of the incidents that were taking place, albeit some of them taking place outside our premises or our grounds. There was a broken line from our games to these incidents, some of the celebrating, and it's hard to fathom why people weren't able to socially distance better. I understand the passions involved in winning a championship indeed, especially in situations where they haven't been won in a long time. But we had just reached the tipping point, John, and in essence that's how the GAA arrived at the decision it arrived at today.
Okay, so regardless of level 5 or level 3, this is the situation that the GAA have as they've seen it. So for how long is the question, Alan?
Well, as per the statement today, we are very fortunate, Joe, that we got a lot of our games played. We knew that it would have a positive effect on the island, on communities everywhere. But it hasn't been without its challenges, and we've learned a lot along the way. So we simply don't know. I can't answer that question at this moment in time. If things were to improve, and with the blessing of the civic authorities, it's something we might be able to revisit. As you're well aware, we have left training in place, and that was a really important distinction to make. So there is still a focus for people who want to stay fit and healthy while adhering to the guidelines, both children and adults alike. But we just felt that county finals and the passions they store up in people is a different beast entirely. And the inter-county game will take precedence in the next few weeks. I'd imagine most of the counties who, and I think it's 11 in total, who haven't been able to finish their championships, will review the situation either when their county teams bow out of the championship, or perhaps they'll see a window along the way in agreement with county managers.
So look, I mean, maybe you're reluctant to get into specifics, but I think everybody in the country has seen some of the pictures that you're referencing. The Black Rock supporters in Cork on Church Street, jumping up and down, no social distancing, effectively a parade, and supporters engulfing the team. That was one. I know the PSNI are investigating potential breaches of restrictions at the Derry senior final in Balahi. The health minister up there, Robin Swan, has said he's disappointed and angry. So there's just no communicating to people is clearly the conclusion that the GAA have come to when it comes to, as you said, the passions winning. You know, the general responses from those involved then in Cork was, well, look, geez, if we can't celebrate this, when can we celebrate? You've obviously realised that human nature dictates that the message is not being adhered to.
Yeah, you haven't won a county title in 56 years, or you're from Killadangan and you've never won a county title. You know, it probably disarms you, and you just break out of the straitjacket that we've all been wearing societally. But that doesn't wash, unfortunately, and I don't know how you can explain that away. I think the GAA as an organisation has worked hard to build up trust, and that trust has been jeopardised. So what we saw last night, I'm not going to single out any clubs because there have been more incidents than that, Joe, and some of them haven't come to light in the public, but it's just not something we can stand over any longer, and that's why we moved as quickly as possible this morning. We weren't sure when the government were going to move. It didn't really matter. We spoke to the people we had to speak with, and we made the call on it. I think the fact that we'll have a welcome distraction with the inter-county game, provided it proceeds, and hopefully it will, we're certainly planning in that direction, means that people will have something to latch onto. They can still train away, but the idea of county finals now at this stage, having got as many of them played as we have, obviously there's junior and intermediate games as well that won't be able to go ahead. We were fortunate to get a lot of club activity played in a short space of time, but I think it needed a different approach today, and I think that's why the statement that was published earlier came to be.
How strongly did you consider continuing with the games but just having no fans whatsoever allowed?
Well, considered it, Joe, but we're back to the same old problem. After the match, we can't control, we can't hold people's hands afterwards. You know, we don't know. A lot of these things are taking place in private residences. They're not even taking place in GAA clubs. So I think it'd be a little bit churlish of me to say, they've nothing to do with us. Of course they have something to do with us.
And so, Alan, that extends to the county championship, unfortunately.
I don't think it's the same animal, Joe, respectfully. I think the passion's aroused, and I do take the point if Waterford were to win a hurling championship or Mayo were to win. The way we're headed at the moment, there's every chance that our games will be played behind closed doors for a start. And I think then we'll have to have a different conversation with our wider membership. Yeah. And it's a large membership, but I think there's something primal, and I mean that in a complimentary way, about the locality and the club winning that's different to the county winning. I'm not belittling the achievement of a county win either, but I think it's a different beast.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think a lot of us understand the difference. However, the logical conclusion, though, is if you're seeing celebrations like that after county matches, you're going to have to pull the plug in this thing, because the GAA don't want to stand over potential infections on the back of GAA matches. That is the conclusion.
Joe, I don't think they'd be as concentrated, put it like that. I think if a county is jubilant, and I think perhaps today's action might remind people that if maybe we have to reframe the narrative and the conversation before the start of the Inter-County Championship. We can start this championship, and we intend to do so, but it behoves us all to behave in a way that doesn't jeopardise other members of society when we get excited about the games. And hopefully people will stay at home and watch them with families, and I just think it'll be a fantastic distraction for people to watch it in their homes. I hope they will. We don't know where we'll be come the middle or the end of the championship, but I think the last 48 hours have been sobering for everybody for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. So there were outbreaks in the Donegal squad and outbreaks in the Armagh squad. Will matches be forfeited, Alan?
Well, there's not a whole lot of wriggle room in the schedule, and Central Council have discussed this, and they have representatives of every county at it. So if it comes to pass, that's a very stark decision to have to be made. Having said that, I can count on one hand, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little bit more, to be fair, on how many massive outbreaks there were in club teams where games... Certain clubs pulled activity because of the mood music in the locality, but there is no evidence that there have been mass breakouts of positive cases. Obviously, teams have been stood down because of teams being players being quarantined or being self-isolated. But you might have heard last week it is our intention to introduce a fast-track testing scenario for the very condensed Inter-County Championship. But look, this is not a regular championship we're approaching into. This is not 2019.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very different championship. It comes with lots of caveats. And the question you asked me at the outset, will teams have to forfeit? I can't say categorically no, but I certainly hope it won't be the case, and we're planning in that direction.
Yeah, because I mean, there just has to be a level of discomfort here. Even you look at Armagh, you know, they're due to get underway when 17th of October, and then they're away to Clare, and then suddenly they're in championship action the following week. You know, if people celebrating on the street is a concern, then that has to be a concern as well. Is there any possibility or wiggle room in terms of the finale of the championship? Like, could it go to 2021?
It could in theory, yes. Like, as things stand, to the best of my knowledge, January and February are pretty much locked down. We were hoping that it would be kept as a closed season for players who would need a rest, perhaps after a busy club and county period of activity.
Yeah.
But it's not a scenario that we hope unfolds, but if it had to, you can rest assured everybody in society has had to be nimble, Joe. Everybody has to be flexible and adapt to the situation. It's been incredibly fluid, and if that challenge presents itself again, we'll look at it as it arises.
Anthony, I'm going to bring you in on this point in a second, but just want to put to you, Alan. So, look, the North has its own issues as well at the moment. 934 positive tests in the North on Friday. Alan, for instance, at Ulster's rugby match at the weekend, 600 fans were allowed in. We may very well, I would suspect, have different restrictions in the 26 counties and the 6 counties when it comes to fans who can attend. Will there be a GAA-wide policy, i.e. no fans, for instance, across the 32 counties, or will you be adhering the jurisdictions the games are happening in?
The law of the land will apply, Joe. We haven't come to a definite, because this, as I said already, for fear of repeating myself, it's fluid and we don't know whether we're in phase 3 or where we'll be after the 29th of October. But first and foremost, the law of the land applies. Nothing the GAA will do will contravene that. We've juggled this dual jurisdiction challenge since March the 13th. It hasn't been easy. One region has overtaken the other at times. Some have cried foul, saying we're being left behind, and then overtook the south, as happened once. So it's been a challenge all along. It will continue to be a challenge, but I don't think it's an insurmountable one.
OK. Anthony, do you want to come in on some of these points?
Yeah, I mean, the GAA are really responsible. They're dealing with bad behaviour from a small minority of their supporters. For the North, I think the North and the South are likely to work more closely together. There's been a lot of conversation between the two ministers recently last Friday. I'd be optimistic that something useful will come out of that, some level of coordination.
Do you know what, Anthony? We're just in trouble with your line. We'll get you on a better line in just one moment.
Joe, is there one point I could just make to you? I know
yes,
it's all been doom and gloom from a GAA perspective, because you know, it wasn't a decision that we reached lightly, and it wasn't one we wanted to take, but there was a degree of inevitability about it. But we reckoned we'd had over 20,000 games staged at juvenile and adult level, and I'd just like to echo the point of Professor Staines there. We're talking about a handful of fixtures, albeit a handful too many, but a handful of fixtures that presented these challenges to us. But I don't think there was any other way. You know, I don't think you can expect county boards to be able to police it any better than they did in the vast majority of instances. And, you know, there's an overarching collective responsibility here for everybody in everything we do, not just going to a football or hurling match, but and that's just to provide some context in what was reached today. Yeah,
and look, I mean, and respectfully, like a couple of weeks ago when the association was asking Roland Glynn for evidence, I didn't think that was appropriate, but to realistically acknowledge that the celebrations after a match are on the GAA's watch as well, I think is very admirable. And I think, you know, today is a very responsible move in many respects. Can I ask you about in the grounds though? Because there were photos, you know, the Derry final that I mentioned, saw the Meath final on a couple of tweets. It doesn't look like the 2 metres apart is being enforced all that well at times in certain locations of the ground, Alan. Whose responsibility is that at games to ensure that's been implemented? Is it county board? Is it down to officials associated with each club? Who ultimately takes responsibility for people sitting closer together than they should be in GAA stadiums?
The organising committee of a fixture, Joe, so if you're mentioning a given county championship, it's the county. I accept your point. This was put to me a few weeks ago about matches in Healy Park and Omagh, and we looked into it, and the relevant authorities from the government were in attendance at fixtures and said they had no problem, but the camera angles made it look like that there were no rows being left vacant. So while some are better than others, there's no doubt about that, some of the stadia are configured differently, so sometimes the optics are different as a result of that. But I think there's lessons that if there are any supporters going to be going to county fixtures in the next few weeks, that this has to be managed in a certain way, and if that's numbered tickets and seats actually sellotaped down, they just aren't for use. We've seen it everywhere. We see it on the buses, we see it on the trains. It has to be exactly the same, and I think it requires a really high level of stewarding and perhaps guarded presence on occasion. But you'd like to think that having gone to such lengths to get permission or to get agreement to hold these fixtures, that, you know, it would be an act of folly to jeopardise them. So you'd be disappointed in some instances. In other instances, Joe, there are family members sitting together and they're perfectly entitled to do so. So there are a few variables here. It's not always possible to draw a black and white verdict on a television picture. No, I accept that latter point. Anthony Staines, I think you're back with us.
Back again, I hope.
Yes, I hope so. Sorry, so you were making a wider point there about the GAA and just what you've heard from Alan Middleton. We didn't quite hear what you had to say. If you want to give it a try again.
Yeah, I mean, they're being very responsible. A small proportion of this have problems with behaviour. The majority of GAA supporters are being asked to do. You can ask no more than that. As for Northern Ireland, there's a lot more contact between the two jurisdictions about specifically COVID. The 2 ministers for health spoke on Sunday, and I'd be optimistic that the level of coordination will come out, because we face very similar problems. And if we work together, we make it easier to control them and bring back our lives, bring back our sports, bring back our audiences.
OK, listen, unfortunately that line is not quite behaving, but Anthony Staines from DCU, we thank you nonetheless. Thanks very much for your time. So, Alan, just a final word from you. I mean, you've explained the rationale. Obviously, as you can imagine, there are some texts in feeling this is overly harsh on the club players and to just put the matches on absolutely behind closed doors. You've explained your rationale for not doing that. When will we have further decisions on club games? Or, well, I guess we're pretty much into county now anyway. We're talking about a weekend here.
I think you're talking towards the end of the month before. I think the date of October 29th has been mentioned. Look, as a citizen, Joe, I think I've been watching the figures like everybody else. It's nearly become a national pastime, unfortunately. But it doesn't seem to have been a massive improvement despite the lockdown measures that are in place in Dublin and Donegal. And I think we need answers as to why that is. And, you know, lots of us don't understand the behaviour of this virus as much as we'd like to. But just that, to take up that point you've put to me, the problem is not the behind closed doors. It's what's happening after the fixtures in many instances, and we don't and can't control that. So I think non-GA people will be out there asking, you know, have the GA no sense of responsibility? You know, have they no duty of care to the wider members of society? And I think that's the grounding, or that's the position we came from in the position we reached today.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
So anybody whose question I read out gets a Cadbury hamper, no less. So, Teddy, one for
Where's
you.
Where's mine?
It's en route.
Honestly, it's the first Cadbury's appearance I've been to. It's the first Cadbury's appearance I've been to where I've walked in a room and not seen any chocolate. It's embarrassing.
They know you're a little fat little sausage, that's why.
Did you hear what he said then? Call me a fat little sausage. You can't call me a fat little sausage on camera, I mean.
No chocolate for Gaz. That's what they said on the front door.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
All right, a very good morning to you. Welcome along. If you've just joined us, you've missed some great stuff from last night's show, including Alan Milton talking about the GAA's decision to abandon the club fixture list for the next couple of weeks. And obviously then we're into the inter-county season, so we'll see if those county finals get played or when they get played. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on with John Fogarty as well. Loads more, including an NBA star. Owen, you've sat down in the company of NBA royalty.
NBA royalty, Etan Thomas is going to be with us later on, yeah. Played against LeBron James, played with Michael Jordan. Going to get into the Michael Jordan era when he was an old man, really. That's what we're going to get into a little bit later on, when he was playing for the Washington Wizards and the creaking goat that was wandering around the United States Capitol. That's one of the subjects of conversation later on.
Okay, and how is the NBA playoffs going for those of us who are blindsided by the fact that there's just too much sport going on at the moment?
Well, 2 nights ago was pretty interesting when Miami managed to bring the series back to 2-1. The manner in which the Lakers won the first 2 games, you thought that this could be a runaway series. I said beforehand it'll be Lakers in 6, but I genuinely thought it would be Lakers in 4 after the first 2 games. But 2 nights ago, Jimmy Butler came up with one of the best single-game performances in an NBA Finals ever. I saw Brian Armin Graham tweeting yesterday that there is a game score statistic that measures all your output in a game to give you a quantifiable aspect of who is actually the best player at any given time.
Like a player rating system that actually has some science in it.
Exactly. If we use that system, it is the 2nd greatest performance ever in NBA Finals history. The greatest performance ever was LeBron James in that incredible 2016 comeback series against the Golden State Warriors. This is how good Jimmy Butler was 2 nights ago. He is one of the main reasons why people gave Miami Heat a chance in this series, and he is the main reason why Game 4, which is tonight at 2 o'clock Irish time, I think, is going to be such a great prospect. I think Game 5 is Friday night, as in Saturday morning, which is brilliant for everybody who works weekdays like us. You can actually stay up and watch it.
I saw it. Sorry, I had no idea this score existed. Is it only measured for NBA finals? Does it start like the Premier League at a fixed point in history, or are they including all of the finals performances of Michael Jordan in this as well?
You're right, there is, well, Michael Jordan is included, first of all. The date that it goes back to is 1984.
Wow.
So just to give you the exact, so it's the game score statistic which accounts for everything a player does. So this is Brian Armin Graham, I'm getting this off, but he's got it from a stats website. So LeBron James' game score in Game 6 against Golden State Warriors in 2016 was 42.5. Jimmy Butler 2 nights ago was 42. So it just kind of shows how absolutely incredible he was. I just want to get up his exact stat line to kind of give you an example of just what you need to do to get a game score of over 40. 45 minutes, 11 rebounds, 13 assists, and 40 points. So a 40-point triple-double basically is the standard if you want to get a 40-point game score.
Okay, not bad.
Not bad.
I didn't.
Right.
This is an amazing statistic that you've just dropped on us here from the high heavens. Like, you literally could end all player ratings debates by injecting this into all sports, right?
And let's go one step further there. You could end the GOAT debate. I've got the top 20 here in front of me. Michael Jordan appears 3 times. LeBron James appears 1, 2, 3, 4 times. There you go. Conversation over. LeBron James, the GOAT.
It's 8 o'clock at 8:04 a.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of October. Owen Sheehan has solved this. All those countless wasted hours in America, and all it took was you to look up a stats website and come down like the was it Moses in Mount Sinai? Whoever brought the tablets down from Mount Sinai is actually sitting in Kerry. I mean, you should be crowned the Puck Fair King Goat this year, Owen.
I should be, but I'm just wondering now if I actually counted this wrong. LeBron James has 4. Michael Jordan has 4. Oh, God. The debate rages on.
Shane Hannon, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are things?
Pretty good.
It was quick maths there, Owen. Quick maths. It was wrong maths, but it was quick.
It was, getting something wrong quickly is better than getting something right in the long term, right? To fix this for us, Shane, what's going on in the world of sport?
Not a whole pile. I was enjoying that there. I could just imagine Michael Jordan sitting back watching Owen this morning going, and that's when I really got mad. So we won't have to go there now that he has 4, same as Jordan, or same as LeBron. So you've ruined it all. We had the GOAT there, Owen, but that's unfortunate. Should we go through the transfer news, lads? There's quite a bit to go through.
Is there? Yeah, okay. I thought that, like, in the end, there wasn't that much. I mean, obviously, ain't no party like a Thomas party. That's great. We get to make the same joke again and again and really test out that theory that sometimes repetition itself is the joke. So let's go.
Yeah, we'll start with Arsenal, I guess. They probably proved to be the biggest spenders on deadline day last night. I sat up watching it for probably 2.5 hours. That was all I could muster. Mikel Arteta's side splashing out €50 million, as you mentioned, Gerard to provide Thomas Partey away from Atletico Madrid. The Ghanaian midfielder has signed a 3-year contract at the Emirates. Meanwhile, Lucas Torreira has moved in the opposite direction and joined the La Liga side on loan. Manchester United, probably one of the busiest sides, not in the way their fans would have really hoped, though. Completing a deal for free agent Edinson Cavani, former United striker Andy Cole, who's pretty much the same age as Edinson Cavani, not quite, but almost, says he believes the 33-year-old will be a success at the club.
He's quality. He scored goals in Italy, he scored goals for his national team, and he scored goals in France. So I think him coming in, the younger boys can learn off him. You know, if he has the same kind of effect that Zlatan did, I think everyone will be very, very happy with that.
United also paid Porto €17 million for Alex Telles, the left-back, while Amad Diallo will join for an initial $21 million from Atalanta, but he doesn't arrive until January. Elsewhere, Republic of Ireland international midfielder Josh Cullen has signed a 3-year deal at Anderlecht. Ruben Loftus-Cheek joined Fulham on loan from Chelsea. Jack Wilshere is on the lookout for a new club this morning. The midfielder released by West Ham, bringing to an end an injury hit 2 seasons in East London, sending out a statement on his Twitter last night, a bit of a dig at West Ham as well, saying he's been fit, he's 28 years of age, but didn't get the game time that he desired. Theo Walcott has rejoined the club he started his career with, Southampton, on a season-long loan deal from Everton. He took a call on Sky Sports last night as well. Clearly delighted at the move as well, so fair play to him for getting that one. Leeds United have completed the signing of Rennes winger Rafinha. His agent is Deco, in fact, the former Portugal international. The 23-year-old Brazilian has joined the newly promoted Premier League club for an undisclosed fee on a 4-year deal. Meanwhile, former Spurs manager Harry Redknapp, he was on Sky Sports with his son Jamie last night. He believes the transfer business they've done makes them Premier League title contenders. Jose Mourinho's team have signed Gareth Bale, Carlos Vinicius, Sergio Reguilon, Matt Doherty, Joe Hart and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg during the window. Redknapp says the Spurs squad is one of the best in the top flight.
I think they'll make top 4. I think they could even win the league this year. I know people are going to think I'm crazy. I look at that squad. Have a look at that forward line. Son, Harry Kane, Bale. You know, you've got Dele Alli. You look at the strength in depth they've got absolutely everywhere. Midfield, full of midfield players.
So, yeah, I think people will call Harry a bit crazy for that. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. We want to bring you this now. So this is Callum Robinson speaking with Nathan yesterday about his experiences of racism and whether taking the knee makes any difference. Have a look.
Cyrus Christie's been called back into the squad in place of Seamus Coleman. He was talking over the last few weeks about some of the issues he'd had with racism when he was in with Ireland. Some of the quotes he said were, "Cyrus, you're not Irish, you were born in England." And he didn't think that the likes of Richard Keogh, Harry Arter, Kieran Clark were getting those sort of comments. He said, but me, David McGoldrick, Callum Robinson, the 3 black lads that's coming at us, we're the ones that are getting spoken about like that. Have you had any experiences like that, like Cyrus talks about, when you've been in with Ireland?
Not so much. I haven't had a lot. I think when I was at Preston, I had my Preston time, but when I first sort of joined the squad, I had a few tweets and stuff like that. But I haven't had nothing to face or heard anything from anyone, from the fans or crowd-wise. And with Twitter, as you know, you never get a face on the other side of it. So obviously we got them tweets deleted because we want that kicked out. We don't want any of that. And we're obviously playing for the country because we've got Irish in us. So that doesn't make sense at all. Or we wouldn't be playing for the country. And we still put in 100 and 110%. It doesn't matter. So yeah, obviously that's disappointing if Sai's had that. I've had a little bit of it, but maybe not as much as him, or I'm not sure about Didsy. But in general, we're trying to kick that out. And as you can see with football in England, in the Prem and in the Championship and all the leagues, we're really trying to push this, because it's obviously disappointing what's been going on around the world, and football is obviously one of the main sports, and we're trying to push that in general. So yeah, obviously it's not nice that Sai's had to experience that, but with me, I've only had a few tweets, and as you said, you don't know who's on the end of them.
Do you think it's working? Do you think taking a knee for the 10 seconds at the start of a game is having an impact?
Well, of course, because it's every game. Everyone's watching the games, and as I said, it's viewed all around the world, and we're making a stand, and hopefully, even if it's 1%, 2% of even kids growing up, like asking the question, why are they kneeling on? Why they're doing that? And then the parent can answer it, and just little things. There's so much to it, but I think obviously definitely them 1-2% is always going to help this situation.
It's Callum Robinson there in conversation with Nathan. The full stuff is up on our social channels, and obviously I think Callum Robinson's going to play football this week. I think he's going to start. I'm certainly going to be happy enough to see him out there. Just to briefly touch on the point that he's made there, Owen, there's obviously a debate about whether or not this has become performative and it's having any impact on the actual Black Lives Matter movement. But he is right, though, that kids watching this do see the banners and go, what is that? Why does that banner say that? Like literally my own experience of this, watching the tennis at the US Open, the big banner behind Serena, and it sparks a conversation that isn't automatically front and centre in your daily life. And I realise that's a position of privilege as well. There's obviously a balance here between something just becoming part of everyday life, like the little logos that they used to have on the side of their arms, or the stings and the pre-match say no to racism, which clearly weren't working on Champions League night. So there's probably a window of opportunity for this to be a conversation starter, and then it will become wallpaper.
Definitely, and this is something that's coming up in our basketball conversation a little bit later on as well, that maybe one of the useful aspects of this is how much it really annoys the people who are of a right-wing persuasion. And I know our guest later on is going to be talking from an American point of view, and the knee is to right-wing folk in America a far more offensive thing than it is over here. I think that it's at a far different level there, thanks to the Colin Kaepernick protests and what people wrongly believe that they've actually meant in the first place. So that's part of it as well, that it makes people uncomfortable. People who are racist, it makes them uncomfortable thinking about this, that there are football players standing together, kneeling together in solidarity, that maybe for you and I it becomes a fairly mundane task every single week seeing this, but for people who perhaps wouldn't be of a fair mind and I guess would be racist essentially, when they see that, does that piss them off? Does that make them feel uncomfortable? If so, that can't be a bad thing.
No, for sure. 0879 180 180 is the number. You've got 2 minutes left, Shane, to tell us about the rest of the day's sports news.
Yeah, all elite sporting events forced behind closed doors, as we know, from midnight tonight, lads. It's after the government decided to enforce level 3 restrictions across the whole country. The inter-county season is set to resume as things stand later this month, but the GAA haven't ruled out teams having to forfeit games due to COVID outbreak. So you're going to get into all that with John Fogarty in a bit. There is one more fourth round match to complete at tennis's French Open today before the quarterfinals can begin. Ons Jabeur is up against Danielle Collins in a match held over from last night, with fourth seed Sofia Kenin awaiting the winner. We'll move on to rugby. Leinster's Johnny Sexton will miss this weekend's Pro 14 match against Benetton with a hamstring problem. He was withdrawn, of course, as a precaution after 23 minutes of the win against Dragons at the ODS of the weekend. He should be okay, though, for the upcoming Six Nations games for Ireland. And finally, lads, Patrick Mahomes threw 2 touchdown passes as the Kansas City Chiefs beat the New England Patriots 26-10 last night to maintain their unbeaten run. The Patriots without Cam Newton, who was one of 2 players to test positive for coronavirus, causing the match to be delayed by 24 hours to Monday. That win saw the Chiefs become the first team in history to win their first 4 matches in 4 consecutive seasons.
All right, Shane, good stuff for that. Green Bay also absolutely sensational. Aaron Rodgers is back to being old school Aaron Rodgers, if that's relevant to your fantasy this morning. 15 minutes past 8 here this morning. Here's what's coming up for you over the course of the next hour and a half. I'm not good on the pronunciation of this first name. Etan Thomas, is that right, Owen?
Nailed it.
Hey. So NBA legend Etan Thomas talking about his time playing with Michael Jordan and against LeBron James and comparing LeBron James to Muhammad Ali. Then we'll bring you through the papers. John Fogarty of the Irish Examiner is going to talk to us about a wild 36 hours in GAA land, and Kathleen McNamee is going to join us at around about 9:30 to run through a very interesting transfer window saga situation. The big transfer, the one that would have, the Robinho getting off the plane and going, I always wanted to play for Man United. That didn't quite happen in this window.
No, it didn't. Is Cavani as close to a deadline day stunner as we had yesterday? Maybe the Thomas Partey thing, given it looked like the deal was off the table yesterday morning, and all of a sudden Arsenal got their ducks in a row and said, you know what, we will pay that release clause. We got the money from Gunnersaurus, so we're going to be able to pay that release clause, and they managed to turn it around. I would contend on that transfer. Like, I was looking at some of the signings Arsenal have made in that position in recent years. This is possibly their best signing in that position since Gilberto Silva. And that isn't exactly a massive compliment to Thomas Partey, even if it sounds like it. It's just because they haven't had a slew of amazing defensive midfielders down through the years.
I think Gilberto Silva probably there was a slight underwhelmed sense, because he was replacing Patrick Vieira, who was considered to be neck and neck with Roy Keane, and ultimately Silva goes on to have an absolutely brilliant career. But there was a sense that this guy isn't as good as Patrick Vieira. Whereas with Partey, I presume the entire Arsenal fan base is aflame with excitement.
Yeah, the Patrick Vieira in this case is Mohamed El-Neni, so the expectation will be a little bit higher, and he will probably comparatively look a lot better than Gilberto Silva did. Yeah,
so you think you're going to win the league, like Harry Redknapp?
Harry Redknapp was getting. I saw this live last night, and I definitely didn't think this was a crazy thing to say yesterday, and I think Jim White in studio was like, "Oh God, you've given us our line now, Harry," and this was the tone they had taken afterwards. But he's kind of right in what he's saying. The depth that they've actually developed over the course of the summer has been fairly remarkable, and every signing they have made seems to make sense. It almost seems as if, and I know this is a way too early conclusion, but it almost seems as if Jose Mourinho has found a little something again, both on the pitch and in the market, and in terms of what's happening at Spurs there. It's almost as if the Jose we saw at Manchester United, there are actually other mitigating factors for that. And maybe people who are pointing the finger at Solskjaer, maybe those fingers don't need to be pointed as much if the club itself kind of caused Jose Mourinho to be in such a bad place as a manager. I don't know. I accept I'm being very, very forgiving for a manager who's impressed us for 2 games this season.
Yeah, it's early days. It's early days. 18 minutes past 8 here this morning. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Daniel Harris is with us. Good morning to you, Daniel. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How's it going, lads?
So the Manchester United transfer window, taken as a whole, because it was obviously the longest transfer window of all time. Donny van de Beek, Cavani, Alex Telles, the 18-year-old Pelestri, who's been signed from Penarol in Uruguay, and the Atlanta winger, Amad Diallo, who doesn't arrive until January. Diallo's quite expensive for somebody who's played 24 minutes in Serie A, but actually that might be the right thing for a club like Manchester United to do, is to buy the next generation that's an unusual little bit of business that they haven't done that much of in recent years, and might be an indication that they have a slightly different approach in the transfer market. But we can deal with the individuals on a holistic basis. How did they do?
It's hard to say. It's kind of weird where you have discussions about who's had an inverted commas good window, as this is now a thing. But because the point is really whether they're good or not, and you don't know whether they're good or not until they play. However, I do think that United needed really, as far as I saw it, I can see why they bought all the players that they bought, but they needed to fill 3 positions in the first 11. They needed a better centre-back than Victor Lindelof. They needed a better midfield player than Nemanja Matic, and they needed a right winger ready to go straight into the team. And they've managed to sign 73 players, but skillfully avoided filling all of those roles. However, you look at it in that sense, and the board have really let down Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in that they obviously tried to sign Jadon Sancho, but ultimately refused to pay the money that they said they were going to pay, and that is what happened. Whatever internet experts and no marks and whatever tell you about what happened, Jadon Sancho wanted to come to United. He thought he was coming to United until quite late in the transfer window, and United wouldn't pay the money. It's a level at which 120 million euros is a lot of money for any player in this market. On the other hand, the opportunity to sign someone who you think is going to be one of the best players of his generation is not an opportunity that will come all that often. And the chances are that next summer, even if Jadon Sancho is prepared to go through United's prevarications again, and you would understand if he wasn't, there's likely to be competition for him, which, I mean, I think that's why Chelsea signed Kai Havertz, because although Frank Lampard must know that his defence is substandard, next summer, Kai Havertz is not going to go to Chelsea. So they felt like they had to act now, so they did. So the right winger, it didn't happen, and they had a look at other right wingers, and those didn't happen. My guess is that there's just too many centre-backs on the books, so Ole was probably told you can't have a centre-back till you get rid of one. But I also think there's a situation where even if you could buy any centre-back in the world who's available, who would you buy? And the answer to that is not obvious. You're either trying to pay whatever it costs to get Upamecano out of Leipzig, and he just signed a contract this summer, or you're gambling on, like Arsenal did, on Gabriel Magalhaes or whoever it might be. So that's probably why. I think that, and the two signings that I felt would have been transformative for United would have been the centre-back and the upgrade on Matic. As far as the upgrade on Matic goes, it doesn't really seem like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer thought that was a priority, because there wasn't really even very much speculation about United getting someone in that position. And to me, that is the position that would be most transformative, because what it would enable you to do, it would enable United to play a 4-3-3 with two attacking midfield players, not 4-2-3-1 with one attacking midfield player and one midfield player, Paul Pogba, doing, in theory, a bit of attacking and a bit of defending, and in practice, quite a lot of nothing. So it would also mean that you would have a lot more control of the game, because the person who sets the tempo by taking the ball off the back four and distributing it properly would be a massive advantage, something that United don't currently have. It would also give them legs, and it would also mean that the back four was protected. The back four will be protected, the dodgy back four, as we now know is the case, will be protected, one, because the team would have more of the ball, and two, because they would have someone patrolling that area in front of it. Because what I think you really need is, you need someone running about the width of the pitch in the way that we see Fernandinho do with City, for example. And United didn't do any of those things. But you can't judge how good the transfer window has been until you see the players that they did sign, how they do. And so if we look at those players, Amad Diallo Traoré, who, as you say, they did pay a lot of money for, but wherever you look, you will see the people that have seen him saying, here's a serious talent, a proper blue-chip serious talent who should go on to be a really good football player. So I understand why they've done that, and whether he can come in, turn up in January and be good enough to make a difference January to May, I've absolutely no idea. Neither does anyone, really. And likewise for Facundo Pellistri. I think what we're seeing from United, and it's not just those two players, it's the signing of Hannibal Medri, who they bought from Monaco, I think a year ago. The name of the centre-back who escapes me. What they're trying to do is they're trying to kind of build a team that will be good in, say, 3 years, because I think that there is no will on the board to do what it takes to make United successful right now. United will always be chasing for as long as the Glazers are in charge, unless they're able to get 4, 5, 6 players into the first team for whom they paid either nothing or for whom they paid very little. So they're trying to build a brilliant under-23 team with the idea that those players will then move into the first team, and you won't have to go and spend 120 million euros, or not spend 120 million euros on Jadon Sancho, because you bought the player who would be as good as Jadon Sancho when he was 17. Then to look at the players who I guess United did sign for the first team squad, Donny van de Beek looks a really good player. He looked a good player before United signed him, and he's looked a good player since they've signed him when he's been on the pitch. And he's been made to look an even better player by how badly Paul Pogba's played so far this season. And I hope that he is one of the good things that comes out of a 6-1 home gubbing by Spurs. I mean, what a sentence that is. But it seems to me that you can't, if you want to be seen as a manager who is weak, you will allow a 6-1 home defeat by Tottenham to go unpunished. And the players that are responsible for that defeat will remain the players who play in the next game. But what I would hope would be the case is that Van der Beek comes in for Pogba, Dean Henderson comes in for De Gea, and I've no idea what you do at centre-back. But just those changes would at least give a different feel to the team. It would show the squad that you can't lose 6-1 at home to Tottenham and just proceed as if nothing has happened. The Tottenham team aren't even that good. You didn't even force to play particularly well for their 6-1. So I would hope that Donny van der Beek, and I think that even if it isn't after the 6-1 home gubbing by Tottenham, Donny van der Beek looks like a player who is too good to leave out for very long, and it looks like his mentality is such that he won't put up with it, and he will make a case for inclusion based on his performances on the pitch. Alex Telles, only seen him play a couple of times, but I'm nevertheless certain he's a superior player to Luke Shaw. So that is a start. Whether he is as good a player at left back as United would like is something that I'm less certain about, because the way that United play and the way that I think United should play, a 4-3-3 with 2 attacking midfield players, the fullbacks, all the defenders need to be able to defend one-on-one.
Can we just talk about that? Can we talk about the 4-3-3, because that's interesting, right? Like
I love the 4-3-3 in the morning.
Well, does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer love that? That's my fundamental here is like I buy that the Glazers are a very important handbrake on any manager who comes to the club and says, right, I want to buy these players for these positions because they're the world-class players that are going to bring this club success. I buy that Woodward gets outflanked in transfer negotiations and actually probably is quite happy for the transfer saga that they had with Sancho to run all summer because it keeps Manchester United in the back page, and he's confessed that himself. But what I don't know is what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's football philosophy is, what his ambition is, what he's trying to achieve with the team. If he was an old school 4-4-2, I'm going to play like Alex Ferguson did, and I'm going to make sure that everybody does the exact role that they want to, fine. If he is a gegenpressing carbon copy of what's going on at Liverpool, then at least I understand that's what he's trying to do. But I actually think that one of the fundamental issues that they have is that the manager doesn't communicate anybody, certainly publicly, I presume he's doing something differently in private, what his players are supposed to be doing in and out of the ball.
I think that, one of the biggest problems, I think, with the way that United play, aside from the quality of some of the players, is that they're playing this 4-2-3-1, which doesn't get the most, or sometimes anything, out of Pogba. I guess my hope is that the plan is to eventually play 4-3-3, where you have, in order to play 4-3-3 with the players that United have, with 2 attacking midfield players, the person who plays behind them needs to be able to cover the width of the pitch. They need to have legs, and they need to be able to pass the ball forward. And of the players that United have who could play that position, they have Matic, who has no legs and not much range of passing, but is fairly disciplined. They have Scott McTominay, who has all the legs and physical power that you would like for that position, but has a lot of work to do on the sharpness of his passing, the accuracy of his passing. And you have Fred, who doesn't really have the physical presence, but probably does have the legs and always looks to pass it forward, but he's quite careless in possession. So it's hard to know if Ole just does want to play a 4-2-3-1. I think that if he does, then the evidence should be informing him that that isn't working. So I think in terms of how he wants them to play, he wants them to be pressing from the front. He wants them to be a front foot team. Whether all the parts are working that enable that to be effected properly is more of a conversation. We saw it happening towards the end of last season, that it was working pretty well. They were pressing from the front. The third man runs were on point. The quick interactions between the players were on point. But I think what's happened this season is that they turned up undercooked. And I think that opponents have twigged that the defence isn't that good. The defensive record is a lot better than the defending. And teams have, in the Premier League, most teams have at least a couple of players that can hurt you, whoever your team is. And we saw that with Palace. We saw it with Brighton, the way United got away with one. And then we saw it again with Tottenham. And the Tottenham game was, I think, when it went 1-1 and when it went 2-1, there was probably about 5 or 10 minutes when it looked like United were going to equalise, where they weren't like peppering the goal with great chances, but they were starting to exert pressure. They were starting to control the game. And then, boom, they conceded 3 brilliant chances to Tottenham, one after the other. Spurs scored the third one, and that was the end of the game. So I think that the way that United want to play, because to bring it back to Alex Telles, is they need defenders who are able to defend one-on-one. And that is my concern with Telles, because Telles is really good going forward. His delivery is really good from crosses, although he seems to be more kind of a player who's going to swing across him for someone's ahead. And it's not entirely certain who that is going to be. Mason Greenwood, Ole was saying actually just the other day, needs to improve his heading. I'm sure he will get there because he has all the qualities of timing and physicality that you would need to do that. Martial can do it because, I mean, we saw him score a brilliant header at Chelsea last season, but, I mean, he's suspended for the next 3 games anyhow, but it's not really his game. And then there's Cavani. And so, but just with Telles, I'm concerned with Telles that whether or not he has the pace to defend one-on-one. Having done a little bit of internet research on him and just spoken to people that have seen him play, they say that he tends to stand off a quick winger to give himself the space to get in. But yeah, ultimately, if he's tight and the ball goes in behind, he might be able to use his power to get in the road, but he's not going to win a race probably. So that would be my problem with Telles, and also the fact that he's 27. There wasn't a competition for him, so it would suggest that perhaps he isn't quite the level of player that you would want to buy. And if he was, given it's a one-horse race, why did it take until now to get him? Or are you panicking?
Would you be happy, Daniel, if Pochettino rocked up at the end of the international break?
I don't think it'll happen, but I think if Ole were to lose his job for the 6-1 thrashing at the hands of the mighty Tottenham Hotspur, it would be very hard to argue with that. And had they done it in the summer, then yeah, I felt like Ole had earned himself more rope than that he completed his half of the bargain. And even now, the club, he completed his half of the bargain. He got United not just a third in the league, but to a place where they had momentum and they looked like they were developing into a team. You could see what they needed and you could see the things that they were doing that were good, and they didn't furnish him with what he needed to take it on from there. But the way that they're defending and also the way that they're competing this season suggests that things are not good. And if you lose your job for a 6-1 home thrashing by the mighty Tottenham Hotspur, I don't think you can have too many complaints about that. So I think, on balance, would I give him one more go with the players that he's just signed? I can't believe I'm going to ask and then answer my own question like I'm Gary Cook, but I think that's what I'm going to do. Then, yeah, I guess I would understand if they gave him more time, but so poor was the performance against Tottenham, and so poor was the performance in the game before that and the game before that, yeah, if Pochettino turned up, I would find it hard to complain. And so I feel like, am I being fickle in saying that? Because I was happy with where the United were a month ago, but the standard of
new evidence came to light.
Well, I wrote in the summer that the defensive record was better than the defending, but the standard of defending has been so absolutely fucking dreadful that if there were a consequence for that, then it would be quite hard to challenge why that should be the case. Because is there anyone on the coaching team who knows how to make that better? I'm not sure, because first of all, they bought Harry Maguire in the first place when, to me, it was clear that he was not the player that his PR said he was. This big, vocal organiser who plays with discipline and organises the other players. I don't see that. I see a decent English-style centre-back, but not an elite-level player, and not an organiser and a particularly good leader either. So, yeah, I can understand why there would be a problem with that signing, because I felt at the time.
We've asked you for legitimacy ratings all through this window about whether or not Sancho and other signings are going to happen, so we have to get your final take. Mark this transfer window out of 10 for Manchester United.
I think that... so I'm going to mark it. We haven't even talked about Cavani, who, to quickly talk about Cavani, I think would make sense as a signing in some ways. You don't want anyone to go in front of Martial and Mason Greenwood. And so instead, you buy someone from whom they can learn, who would hopefully be good for some goals that you wouldn't otherwise have got, and is an option that is better than Igalo. I totally understand that buy. And people say, well, he's coming for the money, they're paying him a shitload of money. I think a player of Edinson Cavani's drive and pedigree, he might turn up for the money still, because humans are humans, but nothing that we've seen from him suggests that is going to be the case. So we should probably wait for that to be the case before banging on like that is likely to be the case, because I don't think it is. So yeah, Cavani's also not a bad buy, except they could have got him in June. and then he could have been training with United since then.
Yeah.
Since then, and been fit and been used to his surroundings, used to his teammates. So at the beginning of the transfer window, that I felt would have been a smart and sensible signing, that it's a punt. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does work, then that is a smart piece of work. But to do it now smells of panic. And so...
Marks out of 10, because we're out of time.
4.
Oh, scraping a pass.
They didn't sign the 3 things that they most needed.
That's fair enough.
And so even if the other players are really good, for what they need right now, they have not elevated the team in the way that they could, should, and the manager had deserved, and the players had deserved for the team to be elevated. And this is where we are, and it will always be like this as long as the Glazers run United.
Well, that's way more than one word, Daniel, but great to have you with us. Thanks a million. It's 8:35 this morning here on OTB AM. Here's Owen's sit-down with former NBA star Etan Thomas. We'll be back with the papers.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Our next guest today played well over 400 games in the NBA. He played for the Washington Wizards. He went on to play for Oklahoma City Thunder and the Atlanta Hawks. He's also a motivational speaker and an author. His published work includes We Matter, Athletes and Activism. Etan Thomas, you're very welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you wrote a piece in The Guardian last month calling LeBron James this generation's Muhammad Ali, given how fearless he has been in terms of using his platform to speak out about social injustices. And I'm interested, as somebody who came up against LeBron so often early in his career, when was the first time that you identified LeBron as someone who was going to find a true, meaningful voice?
I think he started finding his voice as he got a little older in the league. He was really young when he first came in. And I played against him 3 straight years in the playoffs. We were 0-3 against him, but he 3 straight years. And as he matured and got older, you really saw him finding his voice and finding his place. And I actually participated in his documentary called Shut Up and Dribble. And I was one of the people interviewed for it. And from, you really just seen him speaking on politics, speaking, responding to Trump, talking about the different issues of police brutality and racism that are happening around the country. And his More Than a Vote initiative this year in an election that's really, one of the most important elections of my lifetime. And he's really, fighting to really fight against voter suppression. He just got congratulations from President Obama. I know he's not the president anymore, but I still call him President Obama. And, because of the work that he was doing in that particular field. So he's been doing incredible work. And why I related him to Muhammad Ali in particular was because of the backlash that he's receiving right now from the opposition, where people are actually rooting for him to fail the way they rooted for Muhammad Ali to fail because they disagreed with their stances. And not even, I don't want to say their politics because, fighting for human rights isn't politics. This, it's 2 totally different categories. But with LeBron, you're seeing that a lot from the right, especially this season and the past few seasons. The whole reason why Laura Ingraham told him to shut up and dribble is because she disagreed with what he was saying. And when anyone disagrees with you, especially from the right, then it's stay in your lane, stay in your place. You're not qualified to speak on this topic. But if you're an athlete and you say something they agree with, like Herschel Walker, then they invite you into the Republican convention to have a keynote speak, speaker position. So that's the hypocrisy. But that's the situation that we're dealing with.
If we're comparing the Ali and James curves, let's call it a curve in terms of peak popularity, and then when Ali becomes a pariah. Now LeBron is never going to become a pariah in society, but do you think his curve is at that same point when Ali was excluded from society? Is he at peak divisiveness, I guess, to use that phrase? Like when it comes to riling up the right wing politics and politicians and even non-politicians in the United States, is LeBron doing that more than he's ever done right now?
Well, when you have the president of the United States, speaking of Donald Trump, calling him names and insulting his intelligence, that means that you've riled up. You said something that has an impact. And the thing is that he's the top athlete in his craft. You combine his social media presence, he has more of a social media presence than Donald Trump. When he says something, people hear it. And that's what is the biggest threat to the right, because he has the power to influence so many people. So in that sense, yes, that's very Muhammad Ali-esque, where you have everyone's attention, you have that power, and then that makes you such a big threat. And where you'll have, I used the example, I believe in that article, I don't remember if it was that article in particular, but when the UFC fighter Colby Covington, when he won and they orchestrated their whole thing where he was going to say something bad about LeBron, and Trump was going to call him during the press conference, and it was very poorly executed. It looked like a bad movie. But the reason why they took the time to actually, orchestrate all of that is the power that LeBron had. They wouldn't have done all that if he didn't have the power. You know what I mean? If they weren't afraid of his influence. They did all that to try to threaten his intelligence and try to influence people away from him. So that means when you have somebody like Trump putting that much attention and energy into trying to silence your voice in particular, that means that your voice is very powerful.
For sure, yeah. That Covington-Trump exchange is pretty bad pantomime. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's worth checking out for comic value alone online.
Yeah, I agree.
As somebody who was in the league when LeBron first comes in, like you say, it took a couple of years for him to find his voice. But at the same time, was the NBA a little bit restrictive in terms of encouraging young athletes to come out and speak?
Oh, well, then under David Stern, definitely. And people forget that under David Stern, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and Craig Hodges was whiteballed from the league. That's what happened. I was under his watch. Now, Adam Silver is completely different. He's one of the people that I interviewed I interviewed like 50 different people in my book you mentioned before, We Matter, Athletes and Activism. And Adam Silver, I asked him point blank, would you punish someone for speaking out and saying something that you disagree with? That's always the caveat. Because anybody can applaud someone that they agree with. That's not saying anything. Anyone does that. But when you disagree with them, then can you stand by them? And he's shown over and over again that he would. And he told that to me as well. Then he talked about how much he embraces the history of activism in the NBA. He talked about Bill Russell, and he talked about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I was able to interview both of them for my book. And so Adam Silver is completely different. And he created a culture where athletes feel comfortable in speaking out. Now, in contrast with David Stern, it was a different culture. It was kind of like they hung over your head the Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf or Craig Hodges might happen to you if you speak out. That was the north. So when I came in, I have a reputation of speaking out. I heard that often. So it was completely different. So I am, elated to see the shift in the culture of the NBA once Adam Silver took over the reins.
For people who aren't aware of your own backstory, when did you find your voice?
Well, I found my voice back in high school. I was in high school and I was into speech and debate. So I would write speeches about racism, about police brutality that I experienced at a young age of being 14, 15, 16 years old. And then I just continued it as I got older. So really what put it on a whole different level was while I was playing here with the Washington Wizards, I was speaking out against the invasion of Iraq. And, at that time, like right now, you talk to anybody from the right or the left, they'll say, okay, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't have gone in there. But at that time, as far as public figures, it was like the Dixie Chicks and like Michael Moore and Cornel West and like two other people. You know what I mean? Like nobody was really speaking because it was right after 9/11. Bush drew the comparison like to say, if either you're with us or against us. If you're against us, you're anti-American. He drew the line in the sand. And I was sitting there looking at it. I was like, wait a minute, why are we going to Iraq? What does Iraq have to do with any of this? And I'm looking at the connections, and really I had, my younger brother's friends that I remembered when I was in high school. So when I was a senior, he was a freshman. And some of them joined the military. And he was telling me how some of them are on their way to Iraq. I was like, wait, little Ed is on his way to Iraq, and he's like young. And I was like, oh, then I went to the airport one time and I saw all of these soldiers being deployed, and they looked so young and they looked so scared and everything like that. And I was like, okay, that's morally irresponsible. And then that's what made me speak out. So I was speaking out all around DC, and then it just kind of developed a reputation from there.
So you bring that idea into the league rather than getting to the league like LeBron and finding your voice as a professional basketball player. So how did you feel coming into the league at that point when you do have, I guess, a little bit of the spillover from the Craig Hodges era, the sort of whiteballing of him, and I guess the punishment for free thinking and certainly free expression when it came to political views in the 1990s. Did that ever weigh on your mind coming into the league?
You know, interesting. It didn't until after. So there was like one big anti-war rally in particular that I spoke at, and there was like thousands of people right on the mall in DC, and it went like viral before going viral was a thing because we didn't have social media then. You know, and then I started, because I know I played with Michael Jordan for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I would see the amount of fan mail that he would get every day, like boxes and boxes. You know, I get a letter or two here from people from college or something like that, you know, but it was MJ. But then after that, I started getting a lot of fan mail. And some of the fan mail was positive. Some of the fan mail was very negative. Like, they were very upset. And I was like, oh, wow, they were really, now it was like you're anti-American, you know, calling me the N-word, calling me you don't belong in the country. Everything that you expect to see in Twitter mentions right now, I was getting in the form of mail. And that's when I was like, oh, wow. So then a few people started reaching out to me. I remember the late John Thompson reached out to me, and a couple different activists, and they said, you know, you don't have any idea what you just stepped into, do you? And honestly, I didn't, because I had been speaking at anti-war rallies around DC for a long time before that. It's just that one just got picked up and you know, went viral. And then so, you know, they kind of showed me the ropes and let me know what to expect and how to manage everything. But yeah, no, people were very upset about it. And that's when my team was supportive. The Washington Wizards were supportive. And the late Abe Pollin, you know, he actually called me into his office, and his son was actually at the rally. And so he had this big smile on his face. He was like, I'm so proud of you. And that's great. But if he would have had, you know, it just worked out that he agreed with my politics. Like, he was on the same side of it. So if he would have been different, that whole scenario would have most definitely played out completely differently. Like, but I did not think about all that before. Like, you know, in hindsight, you know, talking to like my wife and, you know what I mean, my mom and my friends, they're like, you probably should have thought of that before. I was like, yeah, I didn't, but, you know, thank God it worked out.
How does the hate mail compute in your head? Does it dissuade you a little bit at all?
It didn't for me. It made my wife a little nervous, to be honest with you, because some of them were really strong, and I was like, okay, maybe I need to get some security. You know, my wife was like, well, it was my wife's suggestion. Yeah, maybe you should get a little security. So we looked into that, and, you know, we didn't ever have any problems. But, you know, when you get people with threats that are so strong, you know, it's hard not. And then multiple, like boxes full of people who are, you know, but it didn't dissuade me, but it showed me the power. And again, what we talked about before, like with LeBron, the fear of an athlete speaking out and using his platform. Now, I'm not on LeBron's level, but I was an athlete doing that. So I did have a platform. I did have the voice, like the media who, you know, picked up on it. I did have a level of influence from being a player with the Washington Wizards, and that was a threat to people. So, and that was just something that I had never thought of, I guess. I would always think of it as, you know, I have this platform, so I can say what I want to say, and, you know, I can influence a lot of people, like more on the positive spin of it. But I didn't think about the negative spin, about the people who are upset and threatened by that because of that platform. So, you know, it was just a learning experience.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very easy to not think about those aspects until those aspects actually arrive.
Right, exactly.
Like, it's very easy for us to sit back and say everybody should be outspoken and everybody should be using their platform, but not everybody is able to appreciate the private drawbacks that come with that. And I guess the public don't understand what you were getting at the time. One of the things I'm actually really interested in from that particular period in your career is Michael Jordan. Did you ever talk politics with Jordan?
It's interesting because, and I always say this with Jordan, because now there's a different MJ. Now he's, you know, kind of evolved, and he's into politics, and he's talking, and he, you know, he actually put on this big fundraiser for President Obama, but before he was President Obama, and gathered all the athletes there, and I was part of it. So he's evolved now. He talks about Black Lives Matter, spoke out about, you know, police brutality a few times when different things happened, so, specific cases. So, but he wasn't like that before, to be quite honest. He wasn't. And it was something that he now regrets. But at that point, he didn't see it. And it's interesting because I saw MJ do a lot of things in the community that he didn't want anybody to know about because he didn't want the attention about anything else except for basketball. And I, you know, because I was there, I'm literally watching him. I remember after 9/11, we're sitting there in the locker room and everything is on, and the people, it's, you know, a terrible, you know, scene, and they're showing these people that lost their family, everything like that. And I was literally like, my locker was right across from him. And so I'm sitting right across, and I'm watching him look at it, and he's like doing this rocking thing that he does, and bites his lip, and he was looking and looking, and he called his guy over, and he came and he said, he told him, I want you to donate my entire salary to the family members that and he pointed to the
Right.
TV, and then he said, but not to organizations. He's like, I don't want to go through organizations. I want you to specifically locate the family members and give them directly to them. And they said, well, what about on top of? He's like, and on top, he wants everybody to get the ration or the portion. And I'm sitting there listening to that with my own ears. And, you know, it's interesting when people say things like he doesn't care about the community and he doesn't do it. And I have like 10 different stories that I can tell like that of what I physically saw him do. So I can't buy into the narrative that he never cared about the community at all. But I would say about as far as using his voice as a platform and speaking out about different things, he just didn't do it. I mean, that's the only way that you could say it. He did not do that, and it's something that he regrets.
Why do you think he regrets it?
Because he sees the power of his voice now,
right?
And you hear him speaking now, and he's talked about it. You know, but I think that he also said, even in The Last Dance, there was a small portion of it, and he said that he was so focused on basketball that was where it was like almost tunnel vision. He was referring to his days with the Bulls, and that's all that he was focused on. Like it was like nothing else. Like it was, you know, complete blinders on. And that's the way. And he talked about regretting that or not realizing how powerful his voice was and how he could have affected change. And it's kind of just ironic because there were people like Craig Hodges who were trying to tell him that, but he just couldn't hear it. But now that he's older, I mean, you get older, you mature. You start, you know, you reflect, you learn different things that you didn't see before. And he's in a different position now where he's not, you know, having the tunnel vision on of playing and trying to win championships and things of that nature and thinking that he has to do it this way and this way only. So now I think if he could go back in time, he would do things differently. But that's, you know, that you learn with age. That's the maturation process.
Yeah, for sure. It's very interesting, that 9/11 anecdote. It suggests to me, this is just guesswork on my part, that there was a slight suspicion of, I guess, certain authorities in the United States of that time that he wanted to give the money directly to the communities. Is that part of it almost, that, you know, if you came out to, you know, speak against a Republican senator in a Carolina election, for example, he would then have to pick the Democrat side. And perhaps the whole idea of the Democrat Party wasn't something that interested him, the whole idea of even if you condemn one thing, you need to be part of another team. Again, just guesswork on my part, but I wonder, is that part of the way he looked at things in the late 90s?
Yeah, I don't know, honestly. I don't know. I mean, talking about the situation in particular with, you know, when he said the Republicans buy shoes too, and the dynamics of that, honestly, I can't even comment on it because I'm not sure. But I could just see what I've seen him do. In particular, you know, I saw him endorse President Obama and, you know, fundraise for President Obama and support him and use his voice and use his platform and encouraging other athletes to do the same and things of that nature. So, you know, I could say from that standpoint, I've seen him do that, but that's an older Jordan, you know.
Do you think that if Jordan came into the NBA 25 years later, he would have become more outspoken sooner if he was in today's generation of player?
Definitely. I mean, because and then also everything included, you have Adam Silver versus David Stern. You have a different culture. You have a, you know what I mean? Now it's not an anomaly for an athlete to speak out about something. Back then it was. You know, I mean, if you think back, the only athletes that you remember are the two that were white ball from the league, you know, and those are the ones that stick out in your mind. You're going to have to really think a little bit harder to think about coming up with other athletes that were using their platforms in that way. And there's a reason for that.
Just one last question on Jordan, and it's kind of away from the idea of speaking out. And like you mentioned, The Last Dance there. The Last Dance is interesting, but in many ways, his Washington career is shrouded in way more mystery than his Bulls career ever is or ever will be. So if there was a last dance produced and it was done on the Washington Wizards, what would the last dance look like in your view?
I think it would show a whole different side of Jordan. And actually, I think they should do that. I don't know if they have the footage or not, but that they definitely should, because you saw a Jordan that was, you know, definitely older. He wasn't the explosive Jordan that he was just athletically, but the internal battles that he had, the times where, you know, we didn't have a camera crew following us, but honestly, you don't know, because sometimes there be camera crews and we don't even, you know, notice them. But it's interesting. I remember one time he was sitting on the training table, getting his knee drained, and this is the second year that he played. And so, if anybody doesn't know what knee draining is, when your knee fills, he was having these knee problems, and it was throughout the most of the season. They didn't really tell the public, but he was getting his knee drained like after every game almost. And I was sitting there watching him, and because I was getting a little ice on whatever I was doing, a little stim. So the doctor came out, and there's this big needle, right? And they stuck it in him. And they pulled it out, and like it was like this black tar goo looking stuff came out, and he's sitting there writhing in pain and everything. And I asked him, I was like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you even playing? You don't need to prove anything to anybody. You're Michael Jordan. That was my question to him. Yeah. And the room fell like dead silent. Like nobody said a word, and everybody just looked at him. And he shook his head. And he looked at me again. He was like, I wish I had an answer for you. And that was it. And that, you know, that moment, it was almost where, you know, it said a lot about him, because there was this drive. And I didn't know if it was to prove to other people, to prove to himself, because he didn't ever really answer the question. But just the look that he had on his face, I could tell that it agonized him. You know, and you know, just certain things like that for people to see, or like what I just explained before about the 9/11 thing. I think it would be, you can make a very good documentary out of those last 2 years.
Absolutely. I'm always fascinated in any athlete who has been at the very top and then due to age, their abilities desert them. Right. How did Michael Jordan deal with that?
Well, I remember one game in particular where he played, I think it was against Indiana, and he didn't play well. We lost. He missed this big shot. You know, I think he ended his record of scoring double digits in consecutive games. It was I don't know, something like that. And the papers were just killing him. Like they were just like, oh, he's old. He's tarnishing his image. He should never came out of retirement. All this different stuff. So we played on a back-to-back. And I remember sitting him, because again, my locker was right across from him, and he was reading the paper. And I thought about it when I was watching The Last Dance. They were showing him reading different papers about people, right? And so he's reading the paper, and he was like rocking again. And he does this thing where he kind of hums. It's just an MJ thing. So he would hum and like look at it, and he'd bite his lip, and he would look. I'm like, man, he's reading something intense over there. You know what I mean? But he's looking at all the negative press clippings. And then that next game, he went out and scored like 50 or 40 or something crazy, and he was the oldest. He scored the many points as, what did he break? Some record where the oldest player to score that many points, something like that. And then all the newspapers were all like, King Jordan. Like, again, the same people who was killing him the day before was all like, oh, King Jordan. And I was looking at it, and I remember talking to Christian Laettner, because his locker was like right next to mine. I was like, wow, they were just killing him. And now the next day, you know, now they're just singing his praises. And he told me, he was like, you'll learn, but that's the way the media is. And, you know, and it was that moment with Christian Laettner, and I looked at him, and there were so many, like I'm saying, there's so many different, they should definitely do a documentary. I don't know if they have the footage, but there's so many different stories that they could have covered.
Wow, I completely forgot that Laettner was on that team as well.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because I grew up, and I told him this when I met him. I was like, I grew up literally hating your guts.
Yeah.
Like, I hated you. Like, I was a big Fab Five fan. Yeah. You know what I mean? And, of course, the running Rebels and everything. But everybody, if there was a player that I could say who I hated more in college basketball than Christian Laettner, I couldn't think of one. You know what I mean? So, but then he was honestly the nicest guy. Like, he was the coolest dude. And my locker, like I said, was right next to him. I remember, you know, calling my homeboys and like them asking me different questions like, hey, so who do you hang out with the team? Like, who's cool and everything like that? I'm like, you're not going to believe this, but one of the coolest people on the team is Christian Laettner. They was like, Christian Laettner? Like, that was the last person they thought that I was going to name. I was like, I'm telling you, he's cool as anything. But no, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he was like public enemy #1 for any American basketball fan in the 90s.
Yes, like, and everybody agreed with that. So it was like no matter your race, your color, your age, everybody collectively hated Christian Laettner unless you were a Duke fan, and that was just amazing.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I totally forgot that they were teammates for the Wizards. That's incredible. Yeah. Himself and Jordan. I'm sure that was an interesting dynamic as well.
Definitely.
I just want to come back to I guess protest in sport just one last time, Etan, because like one of the questions a lot of people will have after everything we've seen this year in the NBA, obviously, but also in terms of what we're seeing in the Premier League in the UK over recent months is, you know, the Black Lives Matter protest has got so much airtime. There are players taking a knee before every game in the Premier League, for example. How does that become not just another symbol, and how do we get to a point where sports protest affects real change?
I think that the way that we'll talk about the NBA players first, but the way that they have, you first utilized their platform and then went into action. So we talked about before with LeBron and formulating his More Than a Vote campaign. That is direct action that he's taking, you know what I mean, to have an impact on you know, our society. And I think that it's interesting because I was having this conversation the other day. The kneeling really bothers the right. Like, it really bothers them a lot. And they're always talking about it. And it's just amazing to me how when somebody is dedicated to twisting a message that is very clear, like, you know, even going back to Kaepernick, you know, Kaepernick took a knee and, you know, he spoke to the media for 15 minutes or however long it was, outlining why he was taking a knee and why he was not taking a knee, what it symbolizes and what it didn't symbolize. He said, this is nothing against the veterans. He said, I have family members that are veterans. He's like, it's not saying that, you know, I'm anti-American. It has nothing to do with the flag. I am specifically protesting police brutality, systemic racism, and the political process. You know, he thought that we should have more options than just Republican Democrats. But he wasn't happy with, you know, either option, Hillary or Donald Trump. So and he explained all of this in detail, very clearly, right? And then as soon as the press conference was over, they said it was a protest against the national anthem and the veterans. And I was like, okay, that means that you are specifically dedicated to misrepresenting the message. And it goes from Trump and all of his supporters on down. And it's not like they don't know they didn't hear what Kaepernick said. That's a you know, purposely done thing to be able to shift the focus. And so that's what's happened with Black Lives Matter. That's what's happened with, you know, because if you speak out against a particular case of police brutality, somehow that means that you're against all police. And they was like, no, nobody said that. Or if you talk about the fact that they need to divest funding from police officers to be able to be responsible for things that they're trained to be responsible for, you know what I mean? Which is the definition of what defund the police means. They changed that to mean abolish police, as if they're synonyms. You know what I mean? And they know the difference between the word abolish and defund. They're two different words. So people are dedicated to misrepresenting what athletes are doing and the message and what people are pushing for. And that's the part where, how do you fight that? That's the question. How do you fight that? Because then people are like, okay, so what does Black Lives Matter really want? Like, what is Kaepernick really, taking a knee for? Like, what's the purpose of players doing? And it's like, they're being quite clear, but they're hearing all the noise and the clutter, and then it's confusing and muddying the waters. And that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
We just have to keep repeating the message and saying what it isn't.
For sure. I definitely kind of didn't consider that about the whole idea of how annoyed the right gets by the symbol of the knee. And I guess that's actually reason to ensure that this keeps happening for that simple reason, because I guess anybody who supports the knee, perhaps the impact of that on a day-to-day basis doesn't impact them as much because they're fully in support of it. But in many ways, it's actually I guess what it is doing to the right and the way they are taking it that is as important.
Great. I agree.
Give us your pick for the NBA Finals before we let you go.
Well, it's hard not to choose the Lakers, you know what I mean? But I'm rooting for Miami. I love the way that Jimmy Butler is playing. I wish everybody was healthy. Much respect to Miami, but it's hard not to root against to not bet on the Lakers if you're a betting person.
Etan, we'll catch up again some other time, and we'll chat to you soon. Thanks a million.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, really interesting stuff there. That podcast is available on the OTB Podcast Network. You can hit subscribe to OTB Highlights and you'll get good stuff like that on its own as well. Now, the papers are up next. First, though, Irish Paralympic swimmer Ellen Keane was recently joined in studio for a panel discussion about the important work of the Irish Wheelchair Association. Her guests were John Fulham, a four-time Paralympian, and Irish discus athlete Orla Barry. The Irish Wheelchair Association has unfortunately had to cancel its annual street collection because of the pandemic. You can still continue to support its appeal online, though. You can make a donation through its website, iwa.ie. And in times like this, as I'm sure you're aware, your online support is absolutely critical to keeping the incredible services of the Irish Wheelchair Association going. In a moment, we'll play a bit of that panel. It's Orla Barry explaining the importance of the Irish Wheelchair Association to her career and actually actively encouraging others to get involved as well.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Premier League is back on Off the Ball with 2 live and exclusive commentaries every Sunday.
First time ball into the back post to Salah. Oh, what a save! And it's in! Liverpool have scored!
And the best analysis around for Brian Kerr, Kenny Cunningham, Damien Delaney and John Giles.
He's real. There's no bullshit with Johnny Giles.
We've got the football show weeknights from 9, live goals every Saturday from 1, and the biggest games every Sunday. That's the Premier League, live and exclusive on OTB Sports Radio. Football on Off the Ball with Paddy Power, fueling the mischief in the beautiful game. Always gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net for more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to try out different things, and you never know if you like something until you try it, or you never know how good you are at something until you try it. So they're giving you the opportunity to try absolutely everything. And even since I was a child, there is even more opportunities now and more sports for them to try. And I know, because I'm from Cork, I know of the Rebel Wheelers in Cork and what they do for kids with disabilities and the opportunities that they give is absolutely fantastic, and they're affiliated with the Irish Wheelchair Association, so there's all clubs around the country. So I would definitely urge any parent or adult or child or whoever is listening to go out there and see what is out there for you to try and see, do you like it.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Ursh to shoot. Dungeon! Oh, what a goal from Fabinho! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what do we get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports, ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
10 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. It's Ger and Owen with you every morning from 7:30 through until 10 o'clock. And if you want to get involved, the best thing to do is to use the hashtag OTBAM, get us on Twitter, @OffTheBall, or of course you can also get us by WhatsApp, 0879 180 180. I'm going to bring you through the newspapers this morning. The Examiner, Cork chair not blaming anyone for suspension of club games, and Kieran Shannon's column is the GAA as a whole has taken its eye off the ball. And then John Fogarty has a story that nobody else has. Sky viewers won't need sports package to see Championship. They're saying that Sky Sports will televise all of their 14 live GAA Championship games as part of their basic package. So that's pretty good news for anybody who has, I think it's both Virgin and the Sky. It's going to be on Sky Sports Mix, so anybody who has that is going to be grand. The Telegraph, obviously, is Cavani. Frantic United have to settle for Cavani. Cavani could be good. There's a chance that Cavani still has enough left to score 18 Premier League goals this season. And if you read Wayne Rooney's column at the weekend, he was saying that actually all of those players at Manchester United will benefit from having an out-and-out number 9. Lack of compliance forced GAA to blow the whistle is Sean Moran's story, and a picture of the Blackrock players celebrating at the weekend. Manager seeks dispensation to let Donegal final go ahead. That's not going to happen. We know that's Malky Clerkin's story there. Robinson eyes frontline opening. It's Callum Robinson who was doing media yesterday as well. No more Mr. Nice Guy. It's Maurizio Pochettino. The picture on the back page alongside Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. It looks like it's an inevitability now, but these things, you know, we thought that Jadon Sancho might have been an inevitability as well. GAA have reacted the right way, but it's too late, says Gerlach Nan, and plug pulled on all club games is the story of a headline on Carl Kane's piece on that one. The Irish Daily Mirror this morning, we will lift nation. It's a lot to put on your shoulders, but it will be pretty good if we could just beat Slovakia on Thursday. We'll be previewing that in more detail on tomorrow and Thursday's shows, obviously. GAA, we had no choice, and United Chiefs on Poch watch. He's just kicking his heels in his luxury mansion somewhere thinking, yep, I'm ready whenever you want. And his price is going up by the day. Arsenal leave it late to sign 45 million Partey. How are we actually saying it? What's the correct pronunciation on?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Partey.
Yeah.
COVID breach trio left out by England. So Tammy Abraham, Ben Chilwell and Jadon Sancho were at a party. Man United better off not signing Jadon Sancho. Partey time, Gunners 45 million deal spends end for Ozil, except it doesn't. It doesn't spend anything for Mesut Ozil, except he's picking up his money for doing nothing. Starty time, Robinson is forward thinking, so party time and starty time. And Inter is coming, but club ties are scrapped. That's Inter-County. The Sun headline writers are talking about there. And the Guardian this morning, Abraham, Sancho and Chilwell will miss the Wales game. It's only a friendly, it doesn't matter. Arsenal, pardon me, obviously the Guardian, an early printed edition of it there. Did I do the mail already? I didn't. Club scrubbed. GAA criticised for suspension of all games. I mean, they were criticised for not suspending games. Now they're criticised for suspending games. So you can't win it all. It's Michal Brody, who is the person quoted there in Michael Clifford's piece. Eurojoy can put smiles back on fans' faces. Enda Stevens, Jeff Hendrick and Robbie Brady at Abbottstown yesterday. They're all looking pretty happy with themselves, it's fair to say. The Irish Independent back page. Inter-County takes priority as clubs go to back of queue. If I told you, Owen, James McLean had a mask that had colours on it, what colours do you think those colours would be?
Is it green, white and orange?
It is. It is. It has his initials on it as well, so he's had it done for him. Somebody's had it done for him. There's a logo on the bottom of it, which I can't quite make out, but yeah, his tricolour mask, you know, because you never miss the opportunity not to wear the tricolour.
You'd want to get a few of them with your initials in it. Like, I've definitely found the habit of just losing masks needlessly over the last little while.
Well, I mean, James McLean also on the back there with just an Ireland one with just the FAI's logo on it, but not his name. So county finals put off by GAA. Focus on inter-county return as backlash feared by Croker. And then the Racing Post this morning, Sinner out to become a saint. This is the French Open. I haven't seen any of the French Open. Rafa Nadal is 16-1 on to continue his tilt to beat Yannick Sinner, who it said was Italian. It's not a very Italian name, is it? Sinner, 19, looked as hard as his native Dolomites when dismissing Alexander Zverev in the last 16. That's an interesting comparison for them to make. And then, obviously, we didn't even talk about the Aidan O'Brien story. O'Brien had to put feed fiasco behind him as he targets big juvenile double. His horses are back in action today after the contaminated feeds disaster ruled out the whole ARC weekend, which was going to be pretty big for them as well. So now it's 14 minutes past 9 here. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, 0879 180 180 is the number. We'll come back to some of the stories in the papers a little bit later on, but I'm delighted to say John Fogarty of the Irish Examiner is with us this morning. John, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Ger. How are you keeping?
Good. It's been a wild enough 36 hours in terms of GAA coverage. What's your overarching sense at the moment? Do you think we're going to have a GAA Inter-County Championship?
I think so, Ger. I think the decision made by the GAA yesterday, obviously public health was the priority, but I think there was a little bit of protectionism involved in the sense that it was protecting the Inter-County Championship as well. And any hope, as much as it is very faint now, that we're going to have crowds, obviously, for the start of the championship, it doesn't look like it. Level 3, obviously, for the next 3 weeks, and the championship falls within that 3 weeks. So I don't think we're going to see crowds, but I would imagine the hope for the GAA, as much as it's a very remote one, is that they will have crowds towards the end, the business end of the championship, when we're getting to All-Ireland quarterfinals, semi-finals and finals. And that decision, that preemptive decision yesterday, as much as, you know, we say preemptive, a lot of people are calling it reactionary now. It just depends on what side of the fence you're on. But that decision, I believe, was, it was a tough one to take, I would imagine. But at the same time, I think, I know I mentioned 8, but I think it's 11 county finals that were senior county finals that were still to be played out of 64. If you work it out like that on the island of Ireland, that's not too bad.
Obviously, it's not just the seniors as well. It's all the other games, the underage games. I know there's an under-14 final. I saw people tweeting about yesterday as well. So it has had a massive impact on clubs that have obviously had great seasons and managed things well enough to get to the point where you were, you know, still progressing. So I can see why there would be devastation around the county or around the country. But it did also feel like in most cases, most people understood why the decision was being made.
I think so. It didn't help on Sunday night, and certainly I was peeved by it as well. That, you know, I was at the Cork final driving back up to Dublin on Sunday evening, and the last thing I saw before I got into the car was Micheál Lahan's tweet that NFIT were recommending level 5. And just as that, you know, we were seeing the scenes, the celebrations in Blackrock, the over-exuberance. I don't think we can call it anything more than that. It was reckless as well, I should say. But there were, you look at the Meath County final, you know, it didn't look to me like there was 200 there. It looked like there was a lot more. I think the GAA were appreciating that things were unravelling a bit. You know, a lot of people, a few people have had things back there at GAA in the sense that, you know, they called out NFIT, so to speak. They looked for a meeting with Ronan Glynn. At that time, though, the GAA were controlling things. We weren't at the business end of county championships. There wasn't celebrations. It was easier to control. But as we got towards the end of these championships, things became a lot hairier. And as Alan Milton said to yourselves last night, you know, a lot of it is out of their control. A lot of it's happening in private settings, public houses at times as well. They can't do so much about that. And human nature, I was speaking to Tracy Kennedy, the Cork chairperson yesterday, and she was mentioning, listen, I'm not going to blame anyone for this. Human nature is human nature. But, you know, when you win a title like that, when you're, you know, was it 64 years with Dungannon, first time for Killadangan, Crosserlock, first time in, was it 50-something years as well. You know, cop on goes out the window, unfortunately. And sadly, they've had to make this decision. And, you know, there is criticisms, people saying that they've jumped the gun away because the government have only gone to level 3. But this had nothing to do with the government. This had to do with the GAA getting their house in order.
In some respects, that was like a PR move, and I don't mean that in the bad sense, but actually they did have to regain the narrative that they had some control over what was happening, because certainly the control had been divested in the clubs and the county boards, and they had been unable to police things in the way that they needed to, and people hadn't taken responsibility as well. I'm not saying that that's a one-way street at all. Joe did make the point, speaking to Alan Milton last night, though, that, like, do we really expect there not to be that wild celebration in Mayo if, for example, they end their own famine? You know, and what, like, at what point does the central responsibility trump the individual responsibility? And at what point? I mean, I'm definitely of the view that, like, we saw the Liverpool scenes, for example, after they won the title, in a fairly similar state, probably a worse state of lockdown. What do you do?
It's something I would imagine they closer to the time that they was be giving serious consideration to. Things like Sky Sports, as we had the story this morning, that Sky Sports are making their games available on their basic packages and the Virgin packages. At least that is going to not prevent, but it's going to disencourage people from going to pubs for games, because obviously things will be a lot more available. Little moves like that, the fact that every game is available on TV, that's going to help too. I think the GAA are doing everything in their power for the time being to avoid congregations and people coming together and celebrating and commiserating and whatnot. I was speaking to a couple of inter-county managers yesterday and putting it to them off the record that what are you going to do if you win a first provincial title in so many years? What are you going to do if you win an All-Ireland title? And they're insisting, they have their own bubble. And that is, I know Alan Milton touched on it last night. The GAA do have their own bubbles. They will celebrate. I know the tradition, is usually to go back on the Monday or the Tuesday night back to the captain's club and celebrate. We're not going to have any of that this year. I think there just has to be, there's just more control, Ger, with intercounty, if from a player point of view, from a management point of view. But absolutely, Ward Mayo to bridge that famine, or to end that famine, I should say. You couldn't. It'd be very hard to control.
The pandemic, I guess, has taught us a lot of stuff, really. It's taught us about how quick it is actually possible to make decisions for the GAA centrally. I know that there was a derogation granted because of the remarkable circumstances here, but the big core lesson seems to be that a split season is inevitable and everybody has really enjoyed it. Has next year and the year after really begun to form in people's minds? Do you have any sense of what the GAA think next year and the year after are going to look like just yet, John?
Well, I think the hope was, I know from, my understanding is that the new incoming president, Larry McCarthy, was very keen on the split season coming in next season, but John Horn would probably be a little bit more au fait with what's going on right now on the ground. And what I think is a bit too ambitious. I think he's on record as saying such as well, Ger. But next year, I would imagine, is going to be a bridging season to a split season. Like I'd safely say that the club month of April is gone, especially with the Allianz Leagues starting late as is expected, because they want to give, now don't get me wrong, the championship, the 2020 championship could still run into 2021, and that would have ramifications for the national leagues. But if they are to get the competition finished this year, I imagine it'll be a late February start. And what we're seeing now, I know Fergal McGill has been doing a lot of work on this, the director of games, player and club administration, doing a hell of a lot of work on it, in fairness to him, and he's looking at the possibility of provincial leagues. It hasn't been ruled out, just to make it regional leagues, for want of a better expression. Of course, that is something that is on the proposals for the football championship, in the sense that they were looking at starting, the flip structure, so to speak, that the league structure would morph into the championship, and the provincials would come back to earlier in the season and be played on a league basis then. So that might give them the opportunity to trial this in a way. But at this moment in time, they're looking at a very stripped back league. They could be, the easiest option probably would be to split the divisions into 2 groups of 4 each, so basically 8 groups across the 4 divisions, football wise. Hurling would probably be able to look after itself, but and then come the championship, because nothing has been decided. We are supposed to, this year was supposed to be the last trial year of the Super 8. I don't think there's any appetite for the Super 8 now, from what I'm getting anyway. So what we could be looking at is the hurling championship as it is over the next few weeks, taking place over a longer period next summer, and then basically reverting back to the qualifier system, if only for next year in football, with obviously the Tailteann Cup, the B Championship.
Are the regional leagues seen as an avenue to phasing provincial championships out, John, or what's the thought there?
it could be a slow death. That's it's a slow train coming, and as much as there was a hell of a lot of merit in the GPA's proposal, which would have obviously got rid of the provincial structures. I think the leadership in Croke Park realised that they have to get there slowly. And it won't be a case of completely getting rid of the championships. It'll have to be a slow death, a death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak. So basically, bringing back the provincial championships to basically replacing them, the leagues with them, would be the start, as you said, on the start of the culling, so to speak, of the provincial championships. Now, we all know that John Horan has said that. He's on record. He said it during the lockdown when he was speaking to his own club's Facebook page, that he was referred to the provincial championships as a monster. The only thing stopping the provincial championships being culled at this moment in time really are the strength of the Munster Hurling Championship, Senior Hurling Championship, and the strength of the Ulster Senior Football Championship. Now, the Connacht Football Championship has certainly been the most improved, but those are really the traditional bastions that are really, well, I won't use the word preventing, but certainly stopping, if you want to call it progress. I would still be a traditionalist in the sense about Munster Hurling Championship and Ulster Football Championship, but they might have to go. They might have to be the sacred cows that are culled over the next while.
Sure. Well, there could be a situation where the Munster Hurling could stay the sacred cow and that is preserved, because the Leinster Hurling Championship hasn't been half bad either. Like that incredible Leinster Championship last year, that the only sacred cow that I think really is probably up for debate might be the Ulster Football Championship. And many people in Ulster might actually argue that it is a disadvantage to teams going into the latter stages of the championship, having been brutalised throughout the rounds of the Ulster Championship, that it might make sense for all parties. So, like, this is interesting. This could be a situation where your pre-season football competitions, your McGrath Cups, etc., could go by the wayside, because you'll have these regional leagues, and those regional leagues essentially become your provincial championships and become your teeing up competition for your main summer championship, thereby getting rid of the league weeks as well. It'd be a great competition, and it would save a hell of a lot of time on a packed calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way things are going on is that we are going to see some sort of dilution of the provincial championships, whether it's by this, basically the provinces becoming the leagues, or the 4 provincial conferences of 8. So that would mean in Ulster anyway, one county having to go to Connacht, I would imagine. And, that might be based, if that is the case, that could be based on the league. That would have appeal to a lot of people in the sense that there would be symmetry. People would be playing at the same time. As you said yourself, Ulster counties wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a way, because as much as they are in traditionally the most competitive provincial competition, they would be playing the same amount of games as the likes of Dublin and as the likes of Kerry and Mayo. So they might be more battle hardened by the time that they get to the All-Ireland stages, but at least they would have played the same games as others. So there is merit in that provincial conference proposal as well. It's going to be very interesting. But if they do go regional leagues at the start of next year, I think they really are trialling it by stealth, if you know what I mean. That they are looking at the flip model. Now, that is, if you want to call it radical, that is certainly the most interesting of all the proposals, because basically it's flipping the league, which I think we all agree has been the most successful football competition in, and I think Tom Ryan is on record as saying that it is the most successful inter-county football competition around. So bringing that into the summer would be appetising in one way, but a little bit of there would be a bit of fear as well, because it would be complete change.
When would it have to be finished by to get the clubs enough time in summer so they feel like they got what they got this year?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jared. The 14 weeks seems very sacred. It's interesting that the CPA, Michal Brioli was saying it there recently, that the 14 weeks, they need that for county championships. And I don't believe the Club Players Association's proposal got too much consideration by the National Fixtures Review Group, because that was around this time last year, almost 12 months ago, that ended quite sourly. But at the same time, the national fixtures group are proposing 14 weeks as well. That the club championships, the counties are given 14 weeks to complete their championships, and thereafter we would have provincial club and All Ireland club. So you work back from that. You really work back. You try and you figure out what time. Fergal McGill is on record as well, saying that the All Ireland championships, the inter-county championships next year are going to be played over a more truncated period, just like we have now. Certainly not. The hope would be not to be played over such a over 49, 50 days as it is going to be the case over the next few weeks, hopefully. But yeah, next summer the portion that the All Ireland championship has is not going to be as much, and we could be seeing July All Ireland finals next year.
Right. And so just in terms of the interprovincial club, can you go week by week? Like, is that a realistic expectation? So, and then you might have a close season even of like 6 weeks, the last 2 weeks of November and all of December off, and then everybody starts again in January. Is that potentially, or are you looking at kind of All Ireland club hurling final early December?
I think early December is more. If you early December and then give the colleges January, that would be I think that would be the hope, Ger, that they would. It seems more realistic that they would finish at the All Ireland Club Championships, and there would be let's be honest, it would be a nice festive feel to the All Ireland Championships in Croke Park at the start of December, all of them being played there. At the same time, I know from speaking to county clubs who have been involved in All Ireland's, and the St. Patrick's Day appeal, as much as it elongates the whole thing, that break over the Christmas, being able to look forward to an All Ireland semi-final as they have done, it's a great opportunity to fundraise. It sustains the feel-good factor. But I think we're beyond that now. I think the players really have to come first, the club players, and not making them wait as long as that. Really has to be the goal now. Week by week, absolutely, Jerry. I can see it definitely happening. Would be obviously you would try and give a break between provincial semi-final, a 2-week break between provincial semi-final, club finals, semi-finals, and provincial club finals. But that I can see that definitely happening. End of October, November. Very similar to what we have now, but just ensuring that the games are played and winners on the day. I think the days of replays now are long gone, and it's not just because of the extenuating circumstances this year.
All of this sounds kind of great.
It does in a way, and this is I would have been one of those who would have felt it was safer for the county championship, the All Irelands to have been played first. But at the same time, would the GAA have realised that the split season is the way to go? Had they gone with county first, maybe not. At the same time, they have run into difficulties now because of celebrations and whatnot. But they have come across a solution here that I think could be workable for so many people, and we've seen some fantastic championships shows. It's not just the fact that we don't have replays and games have to go into extra time. I've been at the Tipperary and county hurling finals. I was at a cracker of a Kilkenny hurling semi-final as well over the last while, and they've been pure enjoyment. And people would have loved to have been there, but they got to see them in some shape or form, be it on TV or streaming, and they've been sensational. But the greatest kick is that the players really, really enjoy it. You speak to TJ Reid, you speak to Alan Flynn and Kildangan, and they're really loving the fact that they are not being brought from pillar to post. They're not. In fairness, Brian Cody is very, very good to the guys in Tipperary, as is Liam Sheedy Brian Cody in Kilkenny as Liam Sheedy in Tipperary. But at the same time, they're being asked. They don't have those dual commitments. They're focusing completely on their club, and they're loving it. And I think it's a win-win situation. I think what we've had over the last while are some of the greatest club championships in a long time, and we're not looking at through rose-tinted glasses. And obviously, I think we would all question ourselves, are we reading too much into these championships and thinking just because we have Gaelic games to watch, they're better than ever? They actually are. the enjoyment has been incredible, and I think the standards are going to come up in the club championships. It helps as well that some of the structures of the championships have had to Tipperary obviously would have longed to curtail what was a quite bloated structure, senior hurling championship structure in their county. Cork got a fabulous structure over the line this year, and I think the benefits have been there for all to see, and I just see it as a win-win situation, Joe.
Definitely. Just one other thing on this year, John, and what happens over the next few weeks, because I certainly thought that if level 5 were to come in yesterday, we would have had then 4 weeks to get over level 5, push the championship back 2 weeks and try and compress it in even further before Christmas. My concern now is that if we do go up the phases and do get to level 5, that there will be no wiggle room for the GAA. There will be no way of playing the championships this year unless they get special dispensation to actually play the games during level 5.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Owen. I would have the exact same fears as yourself, and as that drive, as I said, from Cork to Dublin, everything was going through my head. Thinking about it and what might happen. It's the mastermind situation, isn't it? If they start, they'll finish, or so they'll finish. At the same time, we've seen the likes of the McRory Cup and the cup having to be shared by the two finalists. So there is precedent there for things not to finish. At the same time, there is precedent in that the GAA have always completed their championships, no matter what year it's been. As we know, I think we all became historians during the lockdown, but as soon as this starts on, I would imagine it has to finish, be it next year, and that might have repercussions obviously on the Allianz Leagues in 2021. But the championship obviously would take priority. The fact that the government, I should say, are very keen for this to be played. The fact that they have included inter-county championships up to level 4 is very positive. I think they know, I would have written about it during the lockdown, the importance of the inter-county championships taking place for people's sanity and for people to have something to look forward to. Like, what are we now, 18 days or 19 days away from the start of the championship? It is exciting, people. I've had a lot of people coming on to me and criticising me for asking me, why are you so keen for a championship to take place? But I have people onto me every day asking, they just want that bit of hope. They want something to look forward to. They know they're not going to be able to go to the games, but as we all know, the 47 games, the 30 Sam Maguire Cup games, the 17 Liam McCarthy Cup games are all going to be on TV, and that is so important for people to have that. And the government realised that as well. We're hearing, or we heard last night about NFIT and maybe not having the same sensibilities as the government to what people want, but the government have been well on tune as regards appreciating that a championship would be something to look forward to, would be something to cherish, and would something to make the winter certainly shorter than we're all expecting it to be.
So do you think that there will be special dispensation granted by the government to play a championship should it come to level 5?
I would if it starts. Yeah, I would believe that nothing else now, and they would have to put in stringent, absolutely stringent protocols and whatnot. But they have invested into this championship. They've put money behind it, 50 million, obviously, to the LGFA and the Camogie Association and to the GAA. They have invested in this. They know how much it will mean to people, so I think they realise the importance of it. Obviously, it has to be balanced up with the public health concerns, and if things do exacerbate and get worse, then there has to be a lot of considerations. But this is the tonic, and I think they realise that it is the tonic. Obviously, antidote in any shape or form, but it is the tonic, and it will distract. It will give people something to look forward to, and it'll give people something to talk about.
John Fogarty, thanks a million for joining us today. Cheers.
Pleasure, gents.
John Fogarty, the Irish Examiner, there giving us some thoughts on the general state of the nation at the GAA Championship and whether or not it's all going to go ahead. I think that's a good point, though, that I think there probably will be dispensation for elite sport if we get to, I don't know, it's hard to know at this stage. You would hope there would be, especially given how important those games are going to be to those sports. Up next, we're going to talk football with Kathleen McNamee. First, here's a clip from our latest GAA from our latest Cadbury FC special with Gary Neville and Teddy Sheringham. Sheringham told us about playing for Spurs with Robbie Keane.
Teddy, could I jump in on your style of play as just a jumping off point to get the conversation going? There was a quote from Robbie Keane, who joined Spurs at 23 when you were 36. He said, "Teddy Sheringham taught me how to stand still." So,
is that a compliment?
I think it was meant as a compliment.
That's a fine art, by the way, being able to do that.
Well, I presume it is. So tell us about the art of standing still, you know, if you don't have electric pace to burn defenders.
I don't know whether I realised that myself, or I worked under Brian Clough when I was about 25. And a lot of his aspects of management were simplicity, you know, get the ball, pass the ball the way you're facing, help your mate. There's only one ball coming into the area, go and win it. If you don't win the first one, make sure you win the knockdown. Pass the ball like you want to receive it. Look after your mate. That was about it. And a lot of the time, his players used to go herring about all over the place. And he used to say to them, sometimes just stand still. You're running all over the place like a loose cannon. Stand still, and the game might come to you. You never know. And I think I kind of realised that anyway in my game, but it was an eye opener to hear a manager, you know, in the current climate, especially in those days when it was run and chase and put yourself about. It was nice to hear that, you know, a manager wanted you to stand still.
That's really interesting. I'd never heard or thought of Brian Clough being vicariously an influence on Robbie Keane. It's 9:40 this morning here on OTB AM. If you've just joined us, you're very welcome. You can get us on the hashtag OTB AM, or of course you can get us on the OTB Sports app, which you can download in the App Store. Search OTB Sports now. I'm delighted to say Kathleen McNamee is with us. Good morning to you, Kathleen. How are you getting on?
Morning, guys. I'm good. How are you?
We're going to talk about the transfer window as a whole. We've done a lot of Manchester United today, so we might park them. But Arsenal, on the very last day of the season, the transfer window, have swooped and made the biggest signing. And I guess this is quite a significant departure for this board and the club, and it's big backing for their manager. So you've got to say it was a really good transfer window for the manager and for the team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when the window closed last night at 11, there was definitely a collective sigh from Arsenal fans everywhere that Arsenal had actually pulled through on a signing for once. I think it is important, though, when talking about Thomas Partey, to remember that Arsenal have been looking at him for the last 2 years. So the fact that they only signed him on the final minute of deadline day, I think does say a bit about their scouting. But Arsenal needed someone in midfield, and like yesterday morning, it didn't even look like Thomas Partey was going to come through. I think Charlie Watts was the first person to suggest that Arsenal were still even looking for a deal for him, but I think it's a really interesting signing for Arsenal. I think it's a really good Arteta classic signing in the sense that Thomas Partey, he's very much, his whole career in Atletico, he's very much built up from the ground, and he takes tactics really, really well. He looks at what is needed in a team and he's able to adjust himself. He's not going to come bawling into that midfield or anything. He's going to slowly build his way through what Arteta wants. So I think it's a massive win for Arsenal, and it's really nice to actually see the club follow through on something, because I think the Arsenal of a couple of years ago wouldn't have done that, and that's where we've fallen down so much in recent years.
Yeah, that seems to be just a huge backing of Arteta yesterday, that it does seem to have been a relatively last-minute decision to go for him. They knew for a fact that they wanted him, and they've been tracking him for so long, as you say, but to actually make that call yesterday to say, no, we want him, and the board to actually give Arteta the money shows a real level of trust.
Yeah, definitely. And my real fear for Arsenal this transfer window was that they would do what they had done in past windows, where they set a target on someone. We saw it with Leon and Hussein, they didn't get him, and then they would just go and spend a lot of money on someone who wasn't really that good and didn't really fulfill what we needed. So I think it's really great to see that Arteta has moved into that technical role when it comes to scouting, when it comes to creating the team that he wants. And he's actually, in the first big challenge for him probably in that role, he's actually managed to get one of his top priorities.
The interesting thing as well about Partey, and I know we were talking to Arsblog a couple of months ago about this, and he was making the point that they had tracked him from even his loan spells with Mallorca and Arsenal didn't do anything about that before he actually established himself in that Atletico team. Arsenal had the information on Partey and didn't sign him. And they've kind of moved away a little bit from the scouting network that they had built up over the last couple of years. A lot of those redundancies a couple of months ago were in the scouting network. That if this thing comes off, I mean, Arsenal will be vindicated in their decision to move to this brave new world of recruitment.
Completely, and it's something that I think a lot of fans were worried about when it first happened, because it seemed very much like a throwback to the Wenger sort of era, which obviously didn't end all that well. But I think he will need time to actually prove himself on this. I think securing Aubameyang as well and getting that contract through was as massive as getting Thomas Partey to actually come to the club. Because I think what I found with Arsenal in recent years is you didn't have those key players in the squad who were going to attract other players to come, who were going to be, go to their international teammates or go to former club members and be like, this is the sort of club that you can come to. We're building something good. And I think securing the likes of Aubameyang, bringing in Partey, that's what Arteta is trying to do with the squad. So I definitely think it is a vindication, but I would like to see a bit more from them to know that this is a long-term project.
They've made him the manager, obviously. They changed his title from head coach to manager in September officially. And is your contention essentially that this is now what his era is going to be like? Like, in that context, the fact that it was last minute, does that mean that it's the power struggle and he's won it and this is another sign of that? Or what when you said that you thought it was a reflection on the scouting, what were you getting at there?
I think it's mostly that they obviously had like very much parked the deal, and that they were still able to have it open to come back to at the end. I think a lot of the time when Arsenal in the past parked deals, that was it. It was under the table. Whereas I think Arteta likes to keep a lot of things on file, kind of in the background, and something that he can always return to. So I think it was really good that they were able to get it done on the final day. But also, I wonder the fact that they have been looking at this guy for 2 years. Initially with Emery, one of the reasons they didn't go for him was because that wasn't a position that Emery particularly wanted filled. He wanted it in other roles, or other roles filled. So while it is one of their main priorities, I wonder why they weren't pursuing both at the same time, or why was it left until the final minutes to actually get that deal through. So I suppose, looking as a fan, it would be nice to see that those deals are getting through earlier rather than on the final. I think literally it was announced 3 minutes after 11 last night when the deal went through, and they were only notified about it at, I think it was 11:30 Spanish time.
It's a fair point, really, when you consider they ultimately end up paying the full price. So whoever needed to be convinced took until the last minute to be convinced that the full price was going to be required. But look, ultimately, if it turns out he's a brilliant player, the season's starting so late, there's nothing that is catastrophic in the season already. If he comes in and hits the ground running, then that's going to be pretty good. Where are Arsenal at the moment? Do you think they can actually break the top four, or should we actively be, given the weird results of the weekend, now saying that Arsenal should be able to go on a run?
For Arsenal, I think it would be great to think that they could break top four, but I think for this season, realistically, looking at the squad, like top 5, top 6 would be a good result. But I mean, with the way results are going this season, you just can't really tell. I don't think anyone would have looked at Sunday evening and would have said that those 2 results were even possible, never mind imaginable. So I think Arteta 100% has to look at top 4 and think to himself, that is where I want to be. But even within the club, there's kind of been a certain understanding that Europa League for another year is probably more realistic than Champions League, because there is just such a gap. Like when you saw Arsenal play Liverpool the other week, the first time rather than the second, there was a gulf of class there. And I think Arteta is still very much building a squad that can take on the likes of Liverpool when they actually play in the way we all know they can play. And I think it's getting that consistency in the squad and getting that belief in the squad, and then that's when it will really feel like they are proper top 4 competitors.
How far do you think Arteta is away from having a squad that he fully owns, Kathleen? Because I guess yesterday was also kind of a fact where Guendouzi and Torreira were edging towards the exit door, players that Arteta hadn't exactly warmed to, and I guess Partey was almost a reflex to knowing that you will be down a few bodies in midfield. It does seem that Guendouzi and Torreira are not the only 2 players that Arteta hasn't warmed to. So how close do you think he is to having a squad that he feels is his own?
I think it is very much a case that he is trying to get rid of a lot of players that were brought in as possibly panic buys, and then other ones he is trying to adjust to his system. I don't think he is that far. I think that we very much have seen him set up in a way where it's clear who he likes and how he likes to play. It's just actually getting the team to take on that tactical nuance and play it the way he wants. So obviously stuff like we've even seen it with Ozil. I thought it was quite interesting yesterday when Guendouzi left. Ozil was tweeted about him and how great he was, and Guendouzi replied to that. So I think it seems to me as if there's almost there's two camps in Arsenal at the moment, which in some ways is worrying, because obviously you don't want that divide of like players who it's very obvious that Arteta doesn't want around, and the players that he is focusing his attentions on. But I think he has managed it quite well in that in his press conferences and in his media, he'll just say, I don't want to talk about those players. They are not my focus at the moment. And I think even for themselves, obviously Ozil has his massive contract and that's why he's not interested in leaving. But for the other players, I think they will get to a stage where they're like, we want to play some football. And whether that's loan moves or whether that's actually selling them on in later transfer windows, I think like if you give Arteta a season and a half, he will have the team that he wants.
Just on the other side of North London then, watching Sky Sports News last night, they had Harry and Jamie with a bit of father and son bonding time live on television, and Harry was making the point that Spurs could challenge for the title. Immediately I thought this is ridiculous, and maybe Harry Redknapp made a very good argument, but after a couple of moments of thinking about it, I actually don't think it's the most ridiculous shout in the world. It's a long shot for sure, but his point was based on the fact that they have depth in almost every position, which they do.
Yeah, and they have like Mourinho said very early on in the year that he wanted to add more players to more positions because he was in such dire straits at the end of last season when it came to players in different positions. And also it was something Redknapp said at the time as well. He was like, if Tottenham add a few players in very key positions, they will challenge next season. So clearly he's seen this transfer window and gone, yep, there we go. That's the few players that we needed. I think for me, it is still too early to say. I think it's a bit of a leap. Obviously, getting Gareth Bale back was absolutely massive. And while we know what he can do, I think he is still a relatively unknown because of how he has experienced Real Madrid, because of how Zidane treated him, and then also with injury. I think it kind of, for me, there's very similar ties to like Alex Morgan coming to the women's side. You know, they're great players. They're absolutely massive names, but what can they actually do in those squads? So, and I think a lot of people who are saying Tottenham will do well this season are putting it on Bale and his ability to get goals. But I also think like they made some really, really solid signing. Like Hodgberg in particular was a really great one for the get. Obviously, Matt Doherty's gone in there really on. I think a lot of people are surprised that Jose Mourinho has actually managed to get that many signings past Dan Levy, because, you know, he was one of the few chairmen at the start of the summer who was very much like, we don't have the money for this. There is a lot going on. We need to be really smart about how we buy. But I mean, Mourinho seems to have gotten what he wanted, and now we just need to see if he can actually pull the whole team together and get those consistent performances where you're not 1-0 up and a dodgy penalty at the end is the thing that sinks you. You know, that's what Mourinho needs to work on now.
I think Daniel Levy is starstruck, to be honest. I think that's what's going on. That Jose Mourinho has walked in and flashed his smile and said, hey, baby. And Daniel Levy was like, wow, it's Jose Mourinho, I love you. I think that's what's going on here. I want to talk briefly about the two best teams in English football at the minute. That's Everton and Aston Villa. Both had fairly remarkable both have had unbelievable early returns from their transfer investment over the summer. Are either of these sustainable?
I think possibly I would say more so for Everton than Aston Villa. I think that Carlo Ancelotti just has that. He has that experience. He knows what he wanted. Like both teams, to be fair, very much knew exactly what they wanted. They didn't panic after two not particularly great seasons, and they went out and they targeted the areas that they really needed. So we saw that with James Rodriguez at Everton, and like he has just brought like a complete cohesiveness to Everton that wasn't there before. And then it's absolutely the same with Aston Villa. Like I thought getting Emi Martinez in, great signing, was obviously brilliant for Arsenal at the end of last season. Again, really solid. Ollie Watkins has been an absolute revelation, and I think can keep doing great things. And I think when you look at their seasons, you do have to look at who they have played, and like obviously Everton have had a much softer run in than Aston Villa, so I mean Villa are well on their way to doing well, but I think Everton's real challenge will be Liverpool in the coming weeks, because like Liverpool are smarting, they are going to be hurt. It's the big Merseyside derby. If Everton can get past that with like a respectable result, I think that would stand them in really good stead going forward. And like there's nothing wrong either with having a soft start to your season. You know, we've seen it in other years with Leicester and stuff, that like it actually really buoys you for the rest. So I think getting over those big hurdles will be the true test to see. But I love seeing, that's one of the things I've loved about this season, is the fact that teams have bought cleverly rather than necessarily pushing out the boat and spending a lot of money, and they have seen the results of that already. And obviously like the championship window still hasn't closed, and I think Villa are still looking at bringing in some players, so like there could still be more to add to these squads, which is really exciting.
Just before we move on to Ireland, I just want to go back to something you mentioned there about comparing Alex Morgan and Gareth Bale, because we had Flo Lloyd-Hughes on with us yesterday morning, and I guess she kind of hammered home the fact that this Alex Morgan relationship with Tottenham Hotspur is going to be quite a short-term thing. Is that something you go along with? And I guess the question then is, how long-term can the benefits of having an absolute global superstar in your club, how long can those benefits actually be for?
Yeah, I do think that I don't think it's just solely Alex Morgan alone coming that will make a big difference for the league in general. I think it's the fact that all these players have come. But for Tottenham, I am really curious as to how this is going to affect them, because Tottenham is not known as one of the big women's clubs. It's not known as one that has necessarily always treated its players incredibly well. So like to scoop Alex Morgan is incredible, and I think it's going to do absolute wonders even for the people working within the club when they're trying to like lift its profile and to get an appreciation for what they are working on. But I think it very much is, it's a short-term deal. It'll be so good for them in the next couple of months, because they'll be able to build up recognition for their other players, because people will tune in. I've seen it already, you know, I tweet about Alex Morgan coming out and everyone is like interested in it. All of a sudden, you know, there's massive readership for what she is doing. So if Alex Morgan is playing and she is passing to someone and they're scoring a goal and she's getting the assist, the recognition is building of those other players on the squad as well. So I do think there is definitely potential for long-term benefits, but I don't know if it's quite as big as people initially thought when she first arrived. And even just from like a purely commercial value, you know, being able to sell jerseys with her name on the back of it will do a lot for the women's side of the club. I mean, we saw it with Kristen Press and Tobin Heath at Man United. I think the Daily Mail had a report yesterday saying that they sold more jerseys than any man who had joined the club in their first 3 days. So like that's an incredible commercial output for the women's side, and that's what they need. They need that sort of money, that sort of revenue coming in.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about Slovakia this week then. It definitely seems to me that with the Seamus Coleman injury that we're getting close to Stephen Kenny almost having a team that picks itself. Is that fair to say? Like, I mean, he played two different midfields, but it's pretty clear that it's Howarth, McCarthy and Hendrick that are the standout Premier League performers at the moment. Is that a line to say the team picks itself?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I think Coleman makes it a bit easier for Stephen Kenny going into the game, but it's frustrating when you look at the team because it should be performing a lot better than it actually is, and I'm not really sure where we can bring someone in that's going to make it click and that's going to make it more defensively solid, that's actually going to have people able to run up the pitch and attack. And I think, like, we've seen it with Slovakia, they've had serious troubles in the last couple of days with their defense as well. So really we should be going into a great position in terms of being able to point out those weaknesses, you know, with Dubravka and Hanko and all those missing already. But I think that missing that sort of leadership that Coleman brings on the pitch is something that I would worry about in this sort of one-off game where we need to really perform and we need someone on the team's backs to get that performance, grind it out and just get some sort of a win. You know, I think it was something that was said around the first couple of games is that we just don't really seem to have the nuance in the team to grind out a solid win where you look defensively strong and also you get the dirty stuff done and get the goals.
Yeah, I don't think we do either. Who do you want to play midfield?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still contemplating it, because I just feel like it's a difficult one when we haven't really had a consistency of performance there.
And he's only had 2 games. Like it is hard to know. It's hard to know what he wants. Like, I think he wants James McCarthy. And did he pick his first team in the first game, or did he pick his first team in the second game? So like, but is that, and that's it then? And because we hear he doesn't change that much from the Dundalk watchers over the years, that he doesn't change his team that much. Before you go, I want to say the team has been named. Vera Pauw has named her team for the big game coming for the Irish women's national team. Sorry, she hasn't named her team, she's named her squad this morning. This is the biggest game in Irish women's football in a long, long time, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, a win against Ukraine would set us up so well for going into the Euros. I think we will probably still end up in a playoff, just with the way that different groups are up at the moment. But I think we're in a great position to do it. I mean, Germany put 8 goals past them twice, and we managed to get out of Germany without having that happen to us. So I think we definitely need to go there. We need to get a win. We need to keep our goal there, the ones we let in, low, so that it will help our goal difference at the end of the day. But I think we are in a good position. Every time I watch the Women's Super League, I'm just praying that there's no injuries to Katie McCabe or Denise O'Sullivan or any of those sort of players, because I think that will be make a really big difference to us when we do play Ukraine.
All right, Kathleen, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
That's Kathleen McNamee from ESPN. You can read her on ESPN. You can follow her on Twitter at Kathleen_MCN. That is pretty much all we've got time for on the show today. On OTB Sports Radio, coming up is OTB Gold, Barry Ryan, author of The Ascent, the History of Irish Cycling book. Paddy Power Football Special is live between 3 and 6 today. It's Joe and Richard Dunn at 4. It's a very special crappy quiz from 4 to half 4. From 5 o'clock, it's the Paddy Power half hour with Paddy Power himself and Damien Delaney. Kevin Phillips and Kevin Kilban reunited from 5 to 5:30, and then the life and times of Johnny Kilban is OTB Gold at 6. We think he is related. He is an escapee from Achill in the early part of the very late part of the 1800s, early part of the 19th century, who then went on to become the boxer who has been the longest uninterrupted champion of the world at any weight ever in history. So the Mayo man, who it was around about the same time as Mayo won in All Ireland. So what kind of scenes do you expect, Owen, when Mayo win the All Ireland this year?
Everybody at home, with maybe one visitor only to your home, and that is it, sitting quietly at home, watching the coverage, watching the great coverage, listening to the coverage on the radio, whatever way you're going to celebrate it. I can't imagine there will be even a single bonfire. If
you don't have the OTB Sports app, do yourself a favour, search OTB Sports in the App Store. We're back on air and online from 7 o'clock tonight. Right off the ball on News Talk, OTB AM, back tomorrow at 7:30. See you then. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
The all-new OTB Sports